IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Friday. You guys know what that means. We have the Friday free-for-all mailbag today, which is another day that I always look forward to. There's a question in here about it later, but love buy, sell, holds, love Friday mailbags, in a day where we get to answer the chat's questions. So anything that comes across your guys' minds, go ahead and throw it in the chat. This isn't specific to just premium message board members. If you want your question to get bumped to the top, go ahead and put in a super chat for us, and we'll make sure that we get to that right away. But this show is really geared towards you guys and getting to answer the questions that you might have and some topics we might not have covered throughout the week, or if you have a question and a topic we did cover throughout the week but might have missed the show or something, we'll get those answered today right away. But it is Friday. Weeks are starting to fly by a little bit. We're further and further removed away from the 2024 season with each passing day, which means we are one day closer to 2025. So, Brian, happy Friday. How you doing today, man?
I am great. I'm doing very well, man. Just ugly day here in South Bend. It's just gray and overcast and rainy and just kind of a blah day, but that's why I'm excited to be here for the mailbag. Got started a little bit late. That's some technical difficulties, but hey, better late than never, man.
Hey,
I am ready to rock and roll.
It's the same way here, man. We got, I saw that the forecast today was supposed to be 50 degrees, and I got really excited. And then I woke up, and it looked like 6 p.m. outside because it's just gray all day. But I don't know how you guys are. A little mailbag question of my own to the chat. Let me know what you guys think. I would rather work and be busy inside on days that it's gross rather than days that it's really nice outside, because I would have no reason to want to go outside those days. So that's just me. I don't know how you guys are, but besides the point, I am ready to get started on the mailbag today. Before we do get everything kicked off, everybody make sure you throw in a like. We got 102 people in here ready to kick off this Friday mailbag, and I'm ready to get into it, Brian.
Reminder, if you have a super chat, that goes to the top. We got one from my guy, John A1. Thanks, IB. John, thank you, man, very, very much. And then we got one down here from Rob Osgood.
Super chat from Rob Osgood. Thank you, Rob. Just curious if you have heard anything about the Texas Tech general manager, background, etc. Also, what are they feeding these kids now? 6'5", 330-pound linemen. Crazy.
Yeah. Great question. Great question. I was about to make a couple jokes, but then some people may take that as a political statement, and I don't want to get into that. But natural evolution, baby. We're always getting bigger as a species. I guess that's what it is. As far as James Blanchard, I don't know a ton about him other than kind of what's out there. Again, as I've said, I do believe he's the top target. I don't believe that deal is done. And part of that is because Marcus Freeman's been on the road all week. And, the recruiting this past week has had to take a priority. I would imagine that he gets home this weekend that they'll start to kind of make some moves on there. I do believe from talking to some sources that there's some other people that are in the mix, but I do believe that James Blanchard is the top guy. Look, I don't know a lot about him. He's worked in the NFL. He's worked in college. He's got a great reputation at Texas Tech as a guy that is a top-notch recruiter, builds great relationships with people, a hard worker, smart, knows the game, good town evaluator, all the things you want in that position. And then obviously he's worked really hand in hand a lot with, just obviously the NIL aspect of it and things like that. So that's going to be a part of his background as well. So, look, I have yet to hear anybody bring up anything about any potential fit other than just he's a Southern boy and would have to move up to Northern Indiana. That's the only thing that I've heard about it. And I say that kind of half jokingly, but everything I've heard from different type, and I haven't talked to anybody at Notre Dame about him. So it's not even about getting their opinion, because obviously if they want to hire him, they're going to tell me all these great things about him. I'm just talking about people that I know in the recruiting world, in the college football world, just different things like that I've reached out to that have it just comes across as a guy that just seems top notch and is ascending star based on what he's able to do. Back-to-back top 25 classes at Texas Tech. It's not easy to do. That's not easy to do at all. So,
right.
Yeah, it's real big. I think from everything I can hear, it would be an excellent pickup if they were to get him. But again, as I said, I don't know if that's a done deal at this point in time, Trev.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything outside of that as well. And obviously, we all know that your sources are obviously much more in depth than what mine are, because
We're doing it a lot longer.
Yeah, well, my source is Brian Driscoll. So, so if you haven't heard anything, yeah.
Raymond Hart with a super chat. Thank you, Raymond. Driving today, so just wanted to say hello. Thanks for all the great coverage. You are very, very welcome, Raymond. Let's kick some things off, some recruiting stuff. Trev?
Got a question in here from Aiden Benami. Besides Joey O'Brien, who is your number one target and want for the 2026 class?
Well, I don't know that I have a number one target because every position is important. I have a list of guys that I would love to get, and it's not an extensive list. It's more so focusing on positions where I think are super important. So when I look at receiver, I don't have there's just one guy, because I don't think one guy completely moves the needle. I love Connor Solomon. I've talked about that. I think he's a difference maker. He's a guy that could be an impact player. I think Naeem Burrows is an outstanding player. Notre Dame's in his top 5 or 6 schools. They're probably near the bottom of that list. They went out and saw him this week. I would love it if they could make a move on him. I mean, he's kind of like it reminds me a lot of Ryan Williams. Not quite as good as Ryan Williams. Obviously, Ryan Williams is just a very rare, unique come-along player, but very similar game, athletic, great route runner, hands, speed, all that kind of stuff. I look at the offensive line, and there's a couple tackles that I really like. Kenny Ogboku is a guy that I'm very high on. Defensive line, Samote Katoanga is a guy that I think would be a huge pickup for Notre Dame. There's a couple D tackles I really like, not one that I like above all others. I'm very high on the Ebenezer, the Etowata kid that they just recently offered. I think he's got big-time talent. Joey O'Brien obviously is a guy that they're in the secondary. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that I'm high on that I want them to get on top of what they've already landed that would get me pretty fired up. So it's a big board right now. And those are just off the top of my head, some names that are of guys that I'm super high on in this class. But, I could talk about Braden Robinson. I could talk about Caden Finley. I could talk about Trent Mosley, who I think is a really outstanding player. Is another guy that I forgot to mention there. So it's a very good board so far that I've seen. And, and there's other guys I still have to evaluate more and things like that. So, but just it's an impressive board, Drew. I think the thing, and I put an intel piece on the board last night, the thing that's impressed me is how deep the defensive line board is in this class. Like, if you're a member of the message board, check that post out. And it's the intel of the specific players is just guys that I've seen this week. But the point of the intel was how impressed I am by the volume of big time players that they're going after in this class. And they are definitely big game hunting on the D line. And that's an important, very, very important piece. Very important piece.
Another one from Aiden Benami. Way too early starting 5. Charles Jagasaw, Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig, Anthony Knapp, or someone, and Emil Wagner, Gerby Lambert, Prowling.
I mean, that's kind of what I hope it is. It's either Knapp or I mean, I'd kind of say center, right guard. It's 3 guys that are in the mix for that. Craig, depending on health, Knapp and Absher. I would love to see a battle there at right guard. I think Anthony Knapp would be really good there, but I also think Sullivan Absher is a guy that deserves a chance to be in that competition at right guard. He's a talented player. My wish for Joe Rudolph is just stop freaking moving him around, let him get comfortable at a position, and let him battle. And it's like they almost turned the kid into a super sub before even giving him a chance to learn a position to battle for a starting job. And so I hope that gets corrected this spring and he gets a chance to battle. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'd also throw Christopher Tarrick into that mix at right guard. I don't think we should dismiss him as a potential player in the mix there at guard for a starting job. I'd probably put him 3rd amongst the 3 guys that I just mentioned. But I've been impressed with what I've seen from Christopher Tarrick. I think he at least is going to be in that conversation for what they're trying to do there.
Yeah, I don't really have any variance for what you put up there. I think, like we talked about yesterday, no one person specifically is like locked into a job, right? But I think it's safe to say that some combination of Charles Jagasaw and Billy Schrouth is pretty safe on the left side of the offensive line. But from center to right guard, yeah, I mean, potentially right tackle if Gerby Lambert can really elevate during the offseason and we can see what kind of impact he makes. But again, he would have to dethrone a 16-game starter at the
who
right
was
tackle
solid
position.
at least
Right.
last year. He'd have to play really well this spring. Now,
And
he should get that opportunity, Trev, and that's the
Sure.
point we're making. He should get that opportunity, but he's going to have to play pretty well.
Yep, absolutely. But it'll be a fun competition. Question in here from my guy Quinn. Outside of Notre Dame, what other QB battles will be fun? So before the show, I saw this question come in, and I did a little bit of research on it. And honestly, like, there's not like a crazy amount, because like there's just a good amount of the quarterbacks coming back to college football are ones that will most likely be getting the starting position. Like, there's some open competitions, like obviously outside of Notre Dame's, you have Ohio State with Julian Sayin and Tavian St. Clair. At SMU, that one could be a little interesting with Kevin Jennings and Tyler Van Dyke. At Colorado, it's going to be a battle of who replaces Shedeur Sanders. Could it be Caden Salter? He was a Liberty transfer, and then they got Julian
very productive
Lewis.
Player, yeah.
Mm-hmm. At Alabama, it's Ty Simpson and a highly touted freshman in Keelan Russell.
You also have Austin Mack, who came over from Washington with Kalen DeBoer, who I like quite a bit. Everybody talks about Ty Simpson and five-star recruit. He could be the guy. I won't be shocked if Austin Mack beats him out. I won't. And I like Keelan Russell a lot, but he's probably going to need a year of development. Yeah. I think it's going to be Austin Mack and Ty Simpson battling out for that one. Mm-hmm. And then their rival, Auburn's got one, got Jackson Arnold, Deuce Knight coming in as a five-star guy. You've got Ashton Daniels coming in from Stanford. Now, I don't see any way that Ashton Daniels is competing for that starting job at quarterback. He is a very mediocre quarterback. But I would be very curious if he ends up moving somewhere. Yeah. I mean, I think if he's going to play in the National Football League, it's going to be somewhere other than quarterback. And I'm very curious if he gets beat out at quarterback, does he just move to receiver? Does he move to DB? What would he do? Because he's a very athletic kid. He's just not a quarterback at all.
The only other one that I had on my list is actually it's the Missouri quarterback battle, and it is Bo Pribula, the Penn State transfer, and our guy Drew Pine, who actually somehow still has multiple years of NCAA eligibility left. So that's going to be one to watch at Missouri as well. So there's some.
Couple others. Obviously, Michigan has got an interesting one. They got a transfer, Mikey Keene from Fresno State. It's a solid player. They have Jaden Davis, that was a highly ranked recruit from a couple years ago, who I was never that high on. And then, of course, they have Bryce Underwood. Do they start someone other than Bryce Underwood, and then it's just that person's a holdover for him? Does he play well enough to just win the job outright from the beginning? I think that's going to be interesting. There's been a lot of people that have talked about that Gunnar Stockton is not the automatic starter there, that they've got a kid who's a freshman this year that's going to be stepping into the conversation. Obviously, Ohio State, Julian Sayin, I believe, is going to be starting quarterback there. Some people say that Tavion St. Clair is going to battle him. I don't see that happening. I don't see Oregon. There's been people talking about Oregon maybe having a battle with Austin Novosad. I would be shocked if Dante Moore's not their starting quarterback next year. And those are a couple others that I've heard about. Just kind of, I think you mentioned SMU, right, as being one that would be interesting. Miami, obviously, Carson Beck is if he can't start the season healthy, who steps in for him? And then in other places, it's just like, I got to do more homework on who's coming back and who transferred where. That's what makes this so difficult, Trevor. It's because it's like, you remember, it used to be where you remember high school recruits and you can just immediately like, okay, they got this guy. But now it's like, you don't know who left. So I was going to like, well, Louisville should have one with Miller Moss and Harrison Bailey. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Harrison Bailey transferred again this offseason. And I think he's going to Florida to be a backup of Florida to behind DJ Lagway, which is weird. It's like, why not stay at Louisville and be the back, compete for beat out, it's so weird. But he came in the bowl game, played well against Washington, and then he just leaves. So there's a lot of places where when I was thinking about this question, like, oh, that'd be one. And then you're like, I was like, Georgia's like, oh, Jaden Rashada. And I was like, oh, wait, Jaden Rashada left again. I think I read he's going to sit out the spring and work on developing at quarterback and then find – like, this is such a joke. Like, this kid is, like, not even remotely at all interested in school. And nobody's got a problem with it. Like nobody's complaining about it. Kid's going to take a semester off of school to train with a quarterback coach so he can then find a college to play football at next year. It's like what happened to all these people that talk about, education and all this kind of stuff that now are just totally okay with these kids just not giving two rips about school. It's just a joke, but he's going to eventually go somewhere and compete for a job somewhere, I would imagine. So those are the ones I know that John Mateer is supposed to be the guy. Didn't he pick Oklahoma? And I think that there's another guy that's there. I could be wrong on that they talked about might be in the conversation there, but I don't remember that one. I just remember reading something about it at one point in time that there might be a guy the Michael Hawkins kid that was there. I'd be shocked if he beats him out, but I just, other than that, Trev, I mean, I don't know of a lot of, and the other thing too is now not many kids are willing to be in quarterback battles. If I have to compete, I'm just going to leave somewhere that's promised me a starting job. So you're just not seeing as much of that anymore. And you're seeing a lot of the quarterback battles are like the one at Michigan where, a veteran transfer who's not a Michigan caliber player goes there because he wants to be at Michigan. And he's the bridge between, the present and the future, who's eventually going to beat him out. And it's not really a battle. It's eventually going to beat Bryce Underwood. The question is when. So those things will be interesting. But the one that I'm fascinated probably the most will be the Alabama one. That's the one that I find most intriguing, to be honest with you, see how that one plays out.
Yeah, Alabama and SMU are mine. I'm going to be interested to see how that plays out. It should be fun. Question in here from Kevin Park. Can you explain how offering a player who's playing for money to play for you isn't tampering?
Offering a player who's playing for money to play for you. I don't understand what that means.
I think Kevin's asking, like, how is it not tampering if you're offering money to a player who is not yet on your roster? That's how I interpret it.
Well, I mean, it's only tampering if the guy's on another is literally part of another team. That's the only way it could be tampering. And maybe that's part of the question he meant to ask, and it's not in there. But yeah, I don't I'm not sure how that I'd have to get more of the full question. That I don't know which direction he's going on that one, to be honest with you. So somebody asked where Dylan Lonergan transferred to, and that's a good one. I know he transferred this offseason. Where did he transfer to? Boston College. So that'll be an interesting one. He's got a really big arm. I think Bill O'Brien was part of his recruitment at Alabama. Let me go look at that. Let me just make sure, because I could be getting my dates wrong. 2022. Yeah, he would have been at some point in time part of the recruitment of Dylan Lonergan, who's really live arm, very raw, but lots of talent. So that's an interesting one. I don't know if he's a part of a quarterback competition because I don't know who else is there, because I know they have Thomas Castellanos transferred down there to Florida State. He left Boston College. I don't know who else would be in that conversation, but Dylan Lonergan's got a very live arm, very live arm.
I think Florida State's also having a quarterback competition between one of the guys that they have coming back. I think somebody transferred in, but I forgot.
Thomas Castellanos. He transferred to Florida State. Yeah, and then because I know Luke Kroenhoek transferred.
Yeah,
he went. Where did he go to? He went to. There's been so many transfers that are just so okay. Where did that guy? It's just so odd. He's transferring to. Where did he go to? He transferred to Mississippi State, and Mississippi State lost the freshman they had last year because they were fooling around with Jackson Arnold, Michael Van Buren. And so then he left and he transferred to LSU, where he's supposed to sit redshirt for a year and then take over for Garrett Nussmeier. And so that was a weird one. So it's like there's just so much of this just nonsense going around about quarterback recruiting. And then I don't know if Brock Glenn transferred. Is Brock Glenn still there?
I
Did he
think Brock
transfer?
Glenn, no, he's still there.
Okay.
He's the guy that's going to be battling with Castellanos.
Yeah. Let me see here real quick. Let's see here. Looks like, let's see here. Chubba Purdy is gone. Yeah, there's just so much. This stuff is so ridiculous. They've had so many transfers in and out of that program at quarterback. It's just bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would say Castellanos. Somebody asked where the Cal quarterback went. He went to Indiana. For Francisco Mendoza, he went to Indiana. Devin Brown went up to Cal. It's so freaking ridiculous. So ridiculous. All right, we had a super chat down here from Andrew Burke.
Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Favorite Notre Dame player of 2025 and favorite play of this past season?
I don't really have like favorite players. I don't really like kind of do that. I would say like I get more into like guys that I am intrigued by because of the need for them to have to step up, things like that. Favorite play this last season? It's a great question. Just trying to kind of go through the season and think about just kind of being there live. I think the touchdown run from Jeremiah Love against Texas A&M in the fourth quarter, when you're just like the culmination of that drive, there was like 3 plays that got me fired up on that drive. It was the third down catch by Jaden Greathouse, the back shoulder to Bo, and then, watching Jeremiah with those back-to-back big runs that put the ball in the end zone. You were like, gosh, they're going to win this game. And you just knew there was so much being put on that game. But, different things that pop in my head. The Christian Gray interception against USC. Thinking of, the Jadarian Price had a big run in that game that helped break that game open, that you're like, okay, they're going to be okay here in the third quarter when he broke a big run. Just trying to look through the season and, just kind of thinking about some different plays. Xavier Watts' interception against Louisville was big. Thinking about the touchdown pass to Jaden Greathouse in that game, which was big. Just trying to think through just some different parts of the season where you had some big moments. I think Army, just that big run by Jeremiah Love, just kind of the statement, the impact of that play, that game. Those are just off top of my head, Trev. Some the most fun play that I probably laughed at the most, and literally laughed in the press box. They said you can't cheer in the press box. Say anything about laughing. Is when they had run a pass play and Riley hit Jaden Greathouse for a big gain with less than a minute left against Purdue in the second quarter. And you're thinking, okay, they're going to go down and score and get another one. And then they call it holding, and they bring the play back. And so it's first and long, and they just run inside zone to Jadarian Price, and he makes a dude miss and then bounces it outside and then weaves his way for a 75-yard touchdown. I'm just laughing. I'm thinking, this is an unreal performance. I've never seen anything like this, where a Notre Dame has just so thoroughly destroyed a Power 5 team, to where you're just like, they're just toying with that team now.
Yeah.
It's like they've been playing CFB 25 for 6 months, and they're still on like freshman level. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they're doing right now. It was just, and I just couldn't help but laugh. I was like, this is unreal. But I'd have to say probably my favorite play this season, Trev, it would probably be a sequence of plays. It was back-to-back plays. It was the strip sack of Gunnar Stockton and the touchdown pass in the very next play. That's when you felt like they're going to beat Georgia. Like, it was kind of an ugly first half. It was just like, you're like, man, Georgia's a great second half team. And that back-to-back play was just like, I was going nuts. I was screaming in my basement. I was going crazy. I was just like, wow. That's probably my favorite sequence of events, would probably be from that game. And then, the 98-yard touchdown against Indiana. There's been so many big plays this year. There's no way I could bring it down to just one. I couldn't.
My favorite one's the 98-yard kick return against Georgia. That was my moment where I was like, okay, Notre Dame's going to win the Sugar Bowl. Because it was, you started to feel it, because it was like Georgia was able to get in there, a good second half team, halftime adjustments. They went in at the half down, and then that game just the kick return kind of just sealed it with, basically the entire second half left to play. It was an exciting play. It was great. But I'm with you, Brian. I mean, there's so many that you could choose from that it just doesn't. I mean, the 98-yard touchdown run by Jeremiah Love, there's a lot, I mean, honestly, I know it was a loss. Some of the 2-point conversions that Mike Denbrock drew up in the national championship were very fun.
The second one with Jordan Faison was really good.
Yeah. So, it's just a lot left on the table, but no. And then as far as favorite player goes, like I don't have one, like not for the sake of anything other than like I'm just a Notre Dame guy. Like I don't want to pick a favorite player and then like be upset if like he doesn't perform a certain way, but somebody else does. Like I don't want to say like, oh, Jeremiah Love's my favorite player, but if Jadarian Price has a good game and Notre Dame wins, I don't want to walk away from that game being disappointed because my favorite player didn't ball out. That's how I am. So,
and being on this side of the table, from being a fan to doing this, you kind of have to try your best to remove some of that as best you can.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, let's go to John A1.
Question here from John A1. Who are your top 5 spring camp sleepers for Notre Dame? Mine are Brennan Vernon, Tay Johnson, Peter Jones, Jack Larson, and Teddy Rizak.
I like the Tay Johnson one a lot. Mm-hmm. Teddy Rizak's probably still a year away. Jack Larson, maybe. I don't think Brennan Vernon's ever going to get a chance to prove himself. It's more of a message board conversation on that one, to be honest with you, at least under the current structure. Sleeper players for me, KK Smith is one at receiver. He's a guy that if he's healthy and focused, I could see him having a bit of a spring breakout. Micah Gilbert would probably be my other one. A guy that not a lot of people are talking about, certainly nationally anyway. That's what I love about the IB community, because it's kind of like, well, who aren't we talking enough about? I'm like, well, between us and the people in the chat, I kind of feel like we talk about everybody. We're pretty knowledgeable of this thing as a community, but obviously Micah Gilbert's not getting a ton of buzz. It's always like Cam Williams. And I think Cam Williams could be a breakout at some point in time too, but I don't know that we would count him as a sleeper because he's a highly ranked recruit. I think Micah Gilbert would be that guy. Christopher Tarrick, I've talked a lot about recently. I think he's a guy that I could see, battling a little bit at that guard position. Armo Mukum, I'm hoping kind of has a bit of a breakout this spring. He's a bit of a sleeper. We're talking about all the transfers and Onye may be coming back or not. And Armel's the guy for me that is a very underrated guy that I think could step up. Luke Talich would be a sleeper for me, being a factor at safety, along with Bronte. I think those are good ones as well. So those are just off the top of my head, those are the guys that I think kind of stand out the most to me. I feel like, from freshmen we could talk about, but I think those be my top 5. So I'm going to go Micah Gilbert and KK Smith. I'm going to go Armel Mukum. I'm trying to think of who my last 2 would be. Let's go Bronte. I'll take Johns. I'll steal one of Johns. I'll go Bronte Johnson. And I'll go, just trying to think of some different guys, some sleepers, some different players to think about. I have to think about who my 5th one would be. Because I feel like I want it to be another DB, but I don't, Luke Talich. I'll go Luke Talich. That's what I'll do. I'll go that way.
I don't know if I'm going to have like 5 per se. Like I have a couple. I think Eli Raridan could be somebody that rises a lot in camp, like for all the talk about wide receivers, and I think they are poised to have a really good camp. I mean, for what it's worth, Notre Dame's tight end room hasn't really been like a big factor. I mean, the last 2 seasons, they've played 29 games, and like the tight ends have had a good game in like 5 of those. So, I mean, I could see somebody like Eli Raridan's stock kind of coming up. Like somebody that we walk away from talking about in camp is like, hey, like he's healthy. He has a full offseason under his belt now, a full season of being healthy under his belt. He's been a problem in camp, so I could see that. I could see maybe somebody like a Kennedy Urlacher when he gets his opportunities in like a DB rotation potentially. Like the safety room is just really deep. And then I'm with Brian. Some of the receivers, Micah Gilbert, I don't think is getting a whole lot of love. Maybe like a Logan Saldate, who knows, stepping up and kind of filling that role of what Jordan Faison is to the team in the spring when he's playing lacrosse. He's going to get some really good on the field tutelage from Will Pauling, so could see something there. But yeah, those are just a handful of mine. But I don't know if I could whittle it down to 5.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of the spring too. Is going through. Somebody mentioned Bodie Cahoon. If he wasn't injured, like late in the season, dealing with that knee injury, I would be willing to maybe put more on him as a potential guy, certainly. But that's what I love about the spring is because there's always somebody that kind of steps up that you're like, didn't see that coming, and becomes a major player. And I hope that we have more of that, I hope, this season. So that'll be interesting. Here's a super chat from Tyler Evans. Tyler says, hey, Trevor, give me your top 5 most annoying fan bases in college football.
All time? Ooh, man. Probably Ohio State's in there. Michigan's in there. I saw somebody in the chat put Indiana. Like they haven't been an annoying college football fan base. Like this past season, they were pretty loud, but like they just had their best season in program history. So I mean, who knows? But outside of that, some are annoying because you get it, right? Like Alabama fans were a lot, but they had one of the best dynasty runs in college football history. So like you kind of, you know what I mean? You kind of
like,
get
it. I don't even view them as annoying because I'm like, dude, we would be such an insufferable fan base if we won as many titles in a 10-year period as Alabama did. It's like, dude, I would be the same exact way. Ohio State fans are, they're super annoying.
And then I hear you, Coach Bent, if I still lived up there, but like, I mean, I live in Indianapolis. I'm closer to Bloomington than what Elkhart is. And believe me, like a lot of IU alum filter into Indianapolis. Now,
dude, it was so obvious that you didn't like that fan base when we first started talking about that game because you could just see the contempt in your face whenever you start talking about Indiana. I was like, oh, he must be having to deal with some Indiana fans on a regular basis but it's like, who cared about their fan base prior to November of 2024 in football?
Yep. But
Georgia's fan base has become annoying. Like, they think they're Bama, but it's like, guys, you had a good 2 years. Like, okay, it was great, and I would love to have had that 2 years, but they have become super annoying. And it's like all the trash they talked before that game, and then afterwards, just like look, just be genuine. Like, just say, look, if you thought that you were going to pound Notre Dame before the game, don't give us this bull crap. Well, we didn't have our quarterback. You knew you didn't have your starting quarterback before the game, and you thought you were going to still kill Notre Dame. This one clown, I can't name a single player on Notre Dame's team. Well, I always say this to people, that says more about you than it does that team. That just tells me you don't know anything about this team. You think that's some sort of own. It's a self-own. It tells me you don't know anything about anybody other than your team. They're a very annoying fan base, Trevor. I know he didn't ask for my opinion, but Ohio State and Michigan have to be at the top of that list. LSU has become in that list for me. They were not on my list. I actually rather enjoyed LSU's program and LSU fans prior to Brian Kelly going down there, and then just some of the, just awful stuff that they will say to you if you have the audacity to say anything like other than Brian Kelly's, the second coming. You just get some terrible stuff in your inbox and all that. So they've become that way for me. They weren't before Brian Kelly went down there, to be completely honest with you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I got, Ohio State, Michigan. See, here's the weird thing with me about some fan bases, and maybe it's just because I'm a fan of an independent team. Conference allegiance is such a weird thing to me. It's like, I mean, you had Ohio State fans rooting for Michigan last year, and you had Michigan fans rooting for Ohio State to win it this year just because it meant something for the Big Ten. I think that's weird. Right? Like, you don't see that in pro sports. Like if the Packers make the playoffs, Bears fans aren't like, man, I hope they do well because that would be great for the NFC North. I think stuff like that is weird. I do. So, and I understand there's rev share and all that stuff, but to me, it's you can't be like the biggest rivalry in college football, but then like kind of like root for each other because it means something for the conference. I think that's silly. But outside of that, I mean, USC fans are kind of few far in between. I think they're pretty fickle, but
I have never had any issues with the USC. I mean, every fan base has their kooks, including ours. But I've never had any issues with USC fans. I just don't know if they care enough. Rose Quartz Lemonade, one of our Ohio State fans, has said this, and I'm going to disagree with it a little bit. He said, I have a theory the more interaction you have with a certain team, the worse they are. I don't agree with that. I've never had issues with Purdue fans. I have had very little issues with Michigan State fans. I think they're nuts in that they burn things down and flip cars over if they ever win anything important. It's like you're a little bit nuts. But I've never had any issues with them beyond just the normal small amount of kooks that are out there. I mean, there's been plenty of fan bases that Notre Dame has played a decent amount. Clemson fans, I've had that's probably the fan base I have the most positive interactions with in social media, in person, where they'll just talk ball with you. They may disagree with you, but it's been. Penn State's got to be in my top 5 list of annoying fan bases. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, LSU, and Georgia. Georgia would not have been there in 2017 and 19. I loved that fan base after 2019. That stretch during there, I met so many good Georgia fans, but I don't know what it is, but since their 2 titles, they have just become super obnoxious and ignorant in how they interact with people, like really bad. Like people that just ran their mouths to me before that game about how they were going to win by 10, blah, 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 and then got all these lame excuses about why they lost. Like you didn't see us jump on our chat. Like, well, if we said like, look, I think Notre Dame could have competed with this guy, if they would have had these guys. That's a statement of fact, but it's not like, well, we wouldn't have lost if we didn't. No, Notre Dame didn't play well. No, Ohio State played really well. They just got beat. The better team won that day. It's not like, well, yeah, it's just like, shut up. You got beat by a better team. It's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that you got to pull your fan card. Louisville fans, Jared Rhodes, Louisville fans are pretty bad. Yeah. BYU fans I've never interacted with. Utah fans, when they came here in 2010, and the few interactions I've had online were really cool. Like, that's probably my favorite in-person fan base outside of Navy people is Utah fans. As far as like interacting in person, Utah, Navy, and Clemson are my 3 favorite fan bases to interact with whenever they've had anything related to Notre Dame. So that was a cool one.
I didn't know that about Louisville fans. So guess you learn something new every day. You definitely learn something new every day. Aiden Benami, is the national media just being nice because they all seem to think and say that the Ash hire was a very good hire? Just curious if they're sugarcoating it. No, I don't think it's just that they're being nice. I just think the national media, if this season taught me anything, it's that the national media doesn't pay attention that in depth to what goes on at Notre Dame, right? I mean, you had national media people saying that Ashton Craig was still going to be a starting center for a playoff game, and he had been injured since September. That's what I've learned, if I'm being 100% honest. Look, we all have our preferences for defensive coordinator hire, and we've been talking about this all this week, so I'm not going to hammer home on this point. Chris Ash is not who I would have went with a defensive coordinator. That is what it is. But I'm not saying that he's super underqualified for the job either. There's red flags. There's red flags in his resume. There are red flags in Al Golden's resume. He hadn't been a coordinator in college football since 2005. Chris Ash hasn't been a coordinator in college football since 2020, and it was COVID. It was weird. So I have not personally seen people like raving about the hire. I just think I just don't think that some national media people are having the same reaction to it as Notre Dame fans are, because you have to think Chris Ash is coming in to replace Al Golden, and no pun intended, that was kind of like the golden standard for Notre Dame's defense here, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I haven't seen any national headlines that are Notre Dame makes big splash hire with new defensive coordinator. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I have not seen that. I have not seen too much of that. So, Question here from John A1. Based on the projected returning roster, how would you construct the offense for short yardage situation efficiency? I mean, for me, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you kind of think that Kedron Young is going to kind of take the place of what Riley Leonard did in short yardage situations. Jeremiah Love showed that he was a tougher runner, but like he's also just not really your third down back. Maybe that changes this year if they use him more in the pass game. But in short yardage situations, I think you'd see more Kedron Young, maybe some more of Aeneas Williams. I think he showed that he was a pretty strong runner this past season. And then from an offensive line standpoint, whatever those starters are, I think you put in 2 tight ends. Maybe depending on the situation, you put in an additional offensive lineman, right? Because you got to think one of Anthony Knapp or Gerby Lambert or Sullivan Absher won't be in the starting lineup depending on who rolls out there on August 31st. And so maybe you bring in an extra offensive lineman. I haven't really seen Notre Dame do a whole lot of that. I don't really recall Mike Denbrock ever doing a whole lot of that. But, I mean, I know I can confidently say I think you would see one of Aeneas or Kedron Young in the backfield in a short yardage situation.
I think how you handle it near the goal line is also different than how you handle it in the field. I'm a big believer that out on the field, I still want to have the option to get in space and throw the football in a short yardage situation. It's different than when you're like 3rd and 1 at midfield is a whole lot different than 3rd and goal at the 1, just because of the space that you have. Yeah. What I found interesting is Mike Denbrock would do a lot of spread stuff near the goal line because he just had faith that between Riley and Jeremiah, they can find a crease and your line can get, can be physical enough to just get a body on a body and then they'll find a hole. They did a lot more of that than I thought they would do. But Trev, for me, I would the goal line next year with all the linemen you have. I get into goal to go situations where I'm bringing in Kedron Young and I'm putting in Gerby Lambert, or if Sullivan Absher's not starting, one of those 2 guys, and just saying, I dare you to try to stop us. 1st and goal at the 3. I'm not hiding anything. I'm putting in, Cooper Flanagan, if he's healthy, will be in the game. I'm going to have Eli Rarid in the game. I'm going to have Kedron Young in the game, maybe another fullback, or maybe another running back to be in sort of a 22 type personnel, 23 type personnel. But I'm going to have 5 linemen, my 5 starters. I'm going to have Gerby Lambert in there at 1 tackle spot. I may have Sullivan Absher at another tackle spot, have Kedron Young at running back. So that gives me 8 guys. My quarterback is 9. I'll put Malachi Fields on the field so I can still have that slot, that fade option. And then I'm going 2 tights or one more running back and 1 more tight. And then I'm just coming saying, I dare you to stop us. Now I wouldn't do that every time, but that's my FU formation. That's exactly what I'd call it too. What's this personnel called, coach? FU. What does that mean? That we're pretty much saying to them, F you can't stop us. That's exactly what I would say we would be doing if like when I'm trying to make a point. Or it's like, look, we've got to get here. We can't do anything cute. We just need to hammer the sucker in there because this is a big one. That's absolutely what I would do. And yeah, that'd be fun.
Oh yeah,
that'd be fun to watch. Yeah, I like it. FU personnel. And how do you signal it in? You just give the middle finger. Could you imagine how the media would handle that if they're signaling in, just giving double birds, and that's how they know that they're going to their FU formation? That'd be awesome.
Oh, that'd be great.
That'd be awesome. I would never do that. All right.
Question in here from I Am Tenzin. Faison will be put back on punt return like he was late in his freshman season to provide a spark back there.
It's possible, but what Jordan's going to have to do is he's going to have to prove he can catch the ball more consistently. I mean, that was a big issue for him is he didn't catch the ball consistently enough. I think the other thing that's going to hurt him as far as winning that job, Trevor, is he won't be there all spring.
Yeah.
You're going to have Jaden Greathouse back there trying to do that. You may have Aeneas Williams back there returning punts. I would consider Jadarian and Jeremiah potentially maybe back there, at least in spots. Hey, we're trying to set up a return here, for whatever reason. I'm going to put my guy back there. Dallas Golden is a potential return option back there as well. So there's some guys that I think they've got some players. KK Smith was a really good returner in high school. He'd be another guy that I would, look at in that regard. Those are all guys that I could say, hey, I could see that guy having a chance to be a difference maker there. And I'm sure I'm leaving some guys out. I know who my kick return guy would be this year. I'm going back to my dude that I had 2 years ago. That's what I would do is Jadarian Price. But yeah, I would. Yeah, that's what I would consider doing that. And I don't know if it's like, I don't think Will Pauling ever returned kicks in college. I mean, he's got sort of that skill set for it, but he's never actually done it.
I saw a highlight of him, and I think he was either on a kickoff return unit or returned one this past season, but like not for a touchdown. Like it was just
it doesn't say, like, I'm looking at his stats. Doesn't have any yards for kick return or punt return. So last year, no yards game. I don't know. It's weird. So, but I mean, it's possible that Faison could be back there. He just still has a lot to prove as far as catching a football.
I also just want him to stay healthy. Like, if I'm just being honest, like if I'm weighing my options of him being healthy enough for punt return or being an integral part of the offense, I'm choosing the offense.
For sure. Now, if maybe he gets beat out by someone at receiver and you're not able to use him as much, but you want to find ways to get him the football more, then the exact opposite is true for me. Right, Trev? Is, let's say Will Pauling outplays him or KK outplays him or something like that, and Jordan's snaps go down by 10, 15 snaps a game.
Sure.
I'm trying to find ways to get him the football. And so that's when I would say, hey, man, let's get you back to a punt return. Did you answered this one while I was away, correct? Okay.
Yep. Aden Benami, am I the only one who continually watches the 550-minute clip Notre Dame put out after the Penn State game? I just keep rewatching. LOL. I don't want this team or season to be over.
I get the not wanting this team to be done. I do. Because there's a lot of great kids on this team that you just know we're never going to see play again at Notre Dame. Thinking about the fact that we're not going to get to see Xavier Watts at Notre Dame anymore, and Riley Mills at Notre Dame anymore, and Riley Leonard at Notre Dame anymore. It's like, yeah, these are great kids that gave you everything they had. And it's always bittersweet because it was such a fun team to watch in October, November, December, January, and February. They gave us so many moments. I mean, gosh, Trevor, you've literally never been alive to watch Notre Dame win a major bowl game. I haven't seen them do that since I was 15 years old. I mean, and they gave us 2 in a week. Just so many great memories of this team and so many things we just haven't seen before, haven't seen in a while. It was a fun team to watch. I don't look at that one, but I still look at different highlights. I'll pull up different highlights. I'll have things pop up on my YouTube feed, like Louisville highlights. Ooh, let's watch those. Did you see the thing that Notre Dame put out the other day?
No,
that was really good.
Yeah,
I'd pull it up here, but they demonetize my channel every time I play one of their YouTube videos on our show. So, but it was really good.
It was very good.
Very well done.
It was very good. Yeah, I mean, I finally have a season that I can go and tell my future kids about.
Yeah,
like that was kind of my biggest takeaway of the season, because it's like, well, I was going to go tell them about 2018. It's like, hey guys, Notre Dame went undefeated. It's like, then what happened? And then the season ended, and I don't want to talk about it after that. Like now it's. They overcame all these injuries. It was the first extended playoff. They got 3 postseason wins in a row. Like, I mean, it was special, man.
Yep.
It was awesome.
Yep. It was a fun year. There's no doubt about that. We've got a super chat down here from Rose Quartz Lemonade. We already kind of addressed this one. He put it up earlier in a non-question, but I did want to at least bring it up to thank him for the Rose Quartz Lemonade. Purdue and Michigan State fans are not good enough to rub you the wrong way. I don't look at it that way. I don't have that snobbery about how you're beneath me because your team's not good. Fan bases are annoying whether their teams are good or bad. And if anything, you're more annoying when you act like a D-bag and your team's not even good. So if anything, it's the opposite. And with all due respect, it wasn't that long ago that Michigan State was a pretty darn good team and was beating Ohio State in some big moments. Why did Ohio State not play for the national championship in 2015? Because they got beat by Michigan State at home. And Michigan State played for the championship that year. So I wouldn't get too high and mighty just because you're better than they are now. And I also remember that Purdue team hanging an absolute annihilation down on Ohio State not too long ago in 2018. So I wouldn't quite go there, to be honest with you. But I've never had any issues with Purdue or Michigan State, but not because I feel I'm better than them because I'm a Notre Dame fan and they're not. It's just I haven't had a lot of bad interactions with that fan base. But I do appreciate the super chat. Let's get up here. We've got one from Brandon Plensner.
Out of the players to enter the portal this past year from Notre Dame, who would you pick to have back on the 2025 squad and why?
Ooh. Who would I want to have back and why? I mean, so you've got Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, you've got the 4 offensive linemen, you have Jaden Mickey, you have Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobira, right? Am I missing anybody? That's pretty much it. I'd probably say I want to hold my take back option until post spring would be my answer. But honestly, I'd probably go with either Rocco Spindler or Pat Coogan. I might lean towards Pat simply from the standpoint of I think Rocco's a better player. But if we're working with the assumption that neither of them were going to start next year, and I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but if we're just going to work with that, I think Pat has more positional flexibility than Rocco, where Pat can be that ultimate sub. He can play left guard, right guard, and center. So I'd probably go there as far as just having that one more year of one of those veterans to provide depth just in case there's some injury problems again, just in case some of those young guys are, in fact, not ready, just in case Ashton Craig's knee doesn't come back the way that you hope or he gets hurt again. I'd probably go with one of those guys. Would be my pick on that one, Trev. I just think post spring we're going to have some better answers to give on that one.
Yeah, for sure. After spring we'll have more, but if I State of the Union right now, I would absolutely take back Pat Coogan. That's no disrespect to anybody else that left. He was the leader of that room, and like right now that room doesn't really have that guy. Like I don't know if they probably do, but I don't know if they have the vocal leader like what they had with Pat Coogan. So that'd be my pick.
Yeah, and again, I think Rocco Spindler is a better player than Pat Coogan. It really is because I think Pat can be a more effective backup because he can play so many positions.
Sure.
But I also understand why he would want to leave because he doesn't want to be a backup. He doesn't want to be a super sub. He wants to be a starter. I understand that. Yeah. I don't mind that. My issues have always been that's not the only reason they're leaving. No matter what people want to convince themselves of, they're not just leaving because they got beat out. That's not the case.
Aiden Benami, thoughts on Jackson Arnold to Auburn? Does he block out Deuce from a starting spot? New start could be what he needed.
I definitely think it's what he needed. I've never been super high on Jackson Arnold. I viewed him as a borderline top 150 quarterback coming out. That's it. I was adamant when there was talk about them trying to recruit him when Dante left the class, and I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'd rather have Kenny Minchie. I think Kenny Minchie's a better talent. I'm not a big Jackson Arnold fan, to be completely honest with you. So will he block Deuce out from starting? Probably early on. I mean, I don't think Deuce is ready to start as a freshman. Deuce needs a lot of work, and we said this when he was still committed to Notre Dame. I think what Jackson does is he gives you a bit of a bridge to where you've got a pretty good quarterback until Deuce is ready. And if Deuce is ready this year at some point in time, then you can play him this year. I would lean towards probably not. And I don't even know that Deuce will definitely be ready next year, Trev, which means you're going to want Jackson Arnold around for at least another season to be your starter. But I think Jackson Arnold is more of a bridge to Deuce Knight than a block for Deuce Knight. If Deuce Knight learns the offense and he's technically sound and he's, reaching his potential, he's going to beat out Jackson Arnold pretty easily. He's just, to me, a long way from that, which is why I felt he needed to go somewhere where he could sit for a year or two and learn. But he had obviously other plans and other aspirations. But I don't think Jackson Arnold is going to block Deuce Knight from starting if Deuce is ready.
Sure. Honest answer, I'm impartial, and that has nothing to do with Jackson Arnold or Deuce Knight. I just am not a big believer in Hugh Freeze, and Auburn hasn't really been relevant for quite some time. So for me, potentially, like I think in this situation, you go with the veteran until Deuce kind of learns a college system, But I mean, there's also a conversation I believe to be had around this day and age of the transfer portal. Like now, who knows? Right. Yep. I mean, now kids, and this isn't specific to Deuce. It's just now when kids get told that they're not going to be day one starters, they bounce.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
sad.
So we'll see. Mm-hmm.
It's very sad. I've talked to some NFL people that have said that they are concerned about that in the NFL because kids aren't learning to overcome adversity. They're not learning the game. They're being taught multiple systems. There's no emphasis on fundamentals. And they think quarterbacks especially are far less prepared to come to the NFL and thrive than they were in the past. I think that's a little bit theory because I don't know that the portal's been around long enough to really have a good read on that. I think that's more them being concerned about it and then talking about how it is an issue, but it's understandable. Because we are not teaching young people to deal with adversity at all. You don't like your circumstance, just up and leave and go in. And it's just, there's absolutely a time and a place to transfer. I transferred after my freshman year, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And there's right and wrong reasons to do it. And just because you're not playing is not one. However, if you were promised a starting job and then they don't give that to you, then yes, I can understand you wanting to leave because you're not playing. And it's not because I'm not playing. It's because you lied to me. You know what I mean? Like you told me this and you did not hold up your end of the bargain. That I understand more. Although I would never ask for an immediate starting job. As a younger player, I would understand it more as a fifth year, but not so much as a younger guy.
John A1, how do you rank the arm strength of all the current and former Notre Dame quarterbacks on the spring roster?
Current and former Notre Dame quarterbacks on the spring roster. The former part I don't understand. Yeah. How do you – maybe he's asking about comparing them to past quarterbacks. We also had a question from Tom Frawley that I wanted to bring up that was similar. Who has the most powerful arm in the quarterback room? Is it CJ or Kenny? Who throws the most accurate ball? So I'll kind of answer both of those in one. I still think the most powerful arm I've ever seen at Notre Dame, just raw power. It's really three guys. It's Malik, and they've all been recent. It's Malik, it is Brandon Wimbush, and it is Everett Golson. They all had powerful arms. Now, the talent of those arms was different. Obviously, Everett was a much more natural passer than all three of those guys. He was a more pure quarterback than those other two guys. But as far as just arm power, those are top of my list right there. Current group, who has the most powerful arm? I'd probably go Kenny, number 1, CJ 2, Steve 3. It won't be long before Blake Hebert's number 1. From just a pure power standpoint, once he starts, because when he uses his feet and he drives, that ball explodes out of his hand. Kenny, CJ, Steve is who it would be right now. And then guys, former Notre Dame quarterbacks. I mean, Riley didn't have like a power arm. Sam Hartman didn't have a power arm. Jack Cohn didn't have a power arm. Drew Pine, Tyler Buckner, Ian Book. Deshaun Kaiser had a good arm, but he didn't have a monster mega arm. Jimmy was more about accuracy, ball placement than he was just great power. Brady had a good arm, not an elite arm. Yeah, Tony. You know who had one of the most powerful arms of my lifetime? Tony Rice had an absolute cannon. He had a bazooka connect. He didn't know where it was going to go, and the offense that he played in, it didn't require it. But as far as just arm power and arm strength, Tony Rice had an absolute cannon for an arm. Absolute cannon. If he came up in the modern era where he was taught the position as a drop back passer or an option guy or spread guy, he would be really dynamic. Somebody said Jarius Jackson. Jarius didn't have a powerful arm. He had a good arm, but it wasn't like super powerful. Yeah, they haven't had a lot of guys with just. Oh, Dane Christ. Dane Christ had an absolute bazooka connected to his right arm. He's another one needs to be in there. He's one that had. I mean, he, again, didn't know all. I still remember the throw he made at the Hail Mary against Michigan at the end of the 2011 game, 2010 game. Threw the ball into the stands. He couldn't control his power. That was a problem that Dane had, but he had an absolute cannon for an arm. So those would be the guys. So who did I say? I said at the beginning, I said Malik, Everett, Wimbush, Dane Christ is in that conversation for just powerful arms. Tony Rice, as far as just powerful arms. Rick Meyer had a really good arm, but it wasn't super powerful. Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen, again, weren't those kind of guys. Jarius Jackson didn't have a cannon. Kaiser had a strong arm, but it wasn't as strong as the guys that I just mentioned. Kaiser threw a great deep ball, but it wasn't that he necessarily had more power than those guys. And I don't care when a guy threw a baseball. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't translate. So anyway, that would be my list of guys. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Coach Bent said Tony Rice, even when his sons were in high school, still had a cannon. Dude, yes, it doesn't shock me. Tony had a bazooka. He had a bazooka connected to his right shoulder. There's no doubt about it. It's a good question, John and Tom. I appreciate those very much. Let's get down here to this one.
Irish Gordian knot. What's the best style of pizza? New York, New Haven, Neapolitan, Sicilian, Chicago deep dish, Chicago tavern, Detroit deep dish, Midwestern Greek, St. Louis, California.
All right. I'm not familiar with all those. I don't know what New Haven pizza is. I'm going to have to look into that. Sicilian. I don't know what the difference between Sicilian. I'm actually typing in New Haven pizza right now. But based on what I'm seeing here, I don't think is New Haven all that much different than that looks okay. I've never had it before. But of the ones I am familiar with, and as I said, I'm not as familiar with Sicilian. I would not like based on what I just saw. California pizza, it's okay. St. Louis, I don't know what St. Louis pizza is. So I don't know what St. Louis pizza is. I don't know what New Haven pizza is. For me, it's easy. It's New York style and it's Chicago tavern style is what I like. And that's what I grew up on in Ohio, is the Chicago tavern style. I hate Chicago deep dish pizza. I hate deep dish pizza, period. I am not a deep dish pizza fan. I don't like anything Greek related because they're so vegetable-y oriented, and I'm not a big vegetable guy. So I don't like the deep dish thing there either. Neapolitan, nope. New York style, Chicago tavern. That's my flavor. I actually bought some equipment, not equipment, but like, things to be able to, I'm actually going to start trying to make some pizzas. I found some really good Chicago tavern style Chicago tavern is the name, but it's like it goes beyond Chicago. It's what we had in Northwest Ohio. It's what I believe Fat Jack's and stuff and Daryl and Daryl's is where I grew up was like more of the Chicago tavern style. But I don't know that they would claim it to be Chicago's tavern. I think it is. I think it's the same thing. Those would be my favorite pizzas. Those would be my favorite style of pizzas. So,
yeah, I like New York style pizza. I like thin crust. Chicago's tavern is pretty good. I like it. I'm like personal preference. I just like when pizza's like cut into triangles. Like I
love. Did you grow up on that?
I had both. Like we would have both, and I had a preference of just I liked it better when it was a thin crust, and because I think it's weird when you get like a middle like it's weird holding a piece of pizza without a crust, like in my opinion. So it's like when you take like a slice out of the middle, it's kind of like you're just holding the, so. But I like it.
Yeah. My wife is like you, Trev. She hates the pizza at Fat Jack's and stuff because she just can't deal with the fact that it's like little squares. Because she's an Italian and she was born in New York, so she grew up eating, she's like you. She likes to fold it in half, and and I'm like, I like that, but it's like I grew up being at the bowling alley, quickly just taking a couple bites of your square and you put it back down, and then you go, bowl and you come back. So. Because like when I was a kid, like obviously we were Fat Jack's and we would sometimes do Daryl and Daryl's, but Fat Jack's was it. And I went to school with the kids whose dad owned Fat Jack's, and now they own Fat Jack's. The Bowles family now owns it. or it owns it, but I think it was Nick, or was it Jeff? I forget who I saw last time I was there and saw him. They run it, but like they would also have that type of tavern style at the bowling alleys. I bowled when I was in middle school and in elementary middle school, but so we'd go to whether it's 20th Century or Mario's or Northwest or wherever we'd go bowl. They'd all have, like, the Westgate had a really good tavern style pizza, but so we'd have that everywhere. And New York style pizza I'd never had that as a kid. I never had New York style pizza till we moved to Virginia Beach when I was in high school, and I had it at a place called Why Not. And my buddy Jake Seeley, who now is really big into fantasy sports, but I had it with him for the first time. That's the first time I remember having New York style pizza. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is glorious. This is phenomenal. I don't remember ever having that as a kid. Like, if we didn't do Fat Jacks, we would do Domino's. If we didn't do Fat Jacks, Daryl's, and then we would do Domino's. My dad really liked Domino's. I liked Domino's. It was okay, but if I could have my pick, it'd have been Fat Jacks growing up. But yeah, I never had New York style pizza until I was in high school. I think that's part of it, because you had both growing up. I only had that and then Domino's, and I never really cared. Domino's, you don't fold in half like you do. It's the triangle thing, and I always found that to be like not great. So I'm tavern guys where I'm at, but I do love New York style pizzas. Once I was introduced to it, I was like, my life was so incomplete, and I didn't know it. I was missing on so much in my life, and I didn't know it. So sad.
I don't love Detroit deep dish. There is a place that I got introduced to. It's on the south side of downtown in Indianapolis called Futuro's, if anybody's ever been there. And it's Detroit style pizza, but the pizza I get, it has like chicken and bacon on it with like dollops of ricotta cheese on it and hot honey. So I don't know if I just like the fact that those are the toppings or if it's Detroit style deep dish. But that's really good. Chicago deep dish is hardly pizza. That's like a pie. Like that's like a legitimate pie. Like not like a, hey, have a pizza pie. Like a legitimate dessert pie. It's very layered. It's very thick. So I remember my family and I, we took a trip when I was a kid to Geno's East in Chicago, and like it was like all of our first times like having like, let's go get the Chicago style deep dish pizza. And we had it. We were like, that was a whole lot. Like that was a lot for a piece of pizza. Like I love toppings, don't get me wrong, but honestly, like a slice of pepperoni New York style pizza, yeah, I'd take that 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. So people in the chat saying Starlight pizza's good. That's like right down the street from my house. We tried it once, and I don't remember if I liked it or not, but the lady that ran the place was so rude. It's like I just didn't even want to go back there. So I don't even remember if it was good or not. Like a lot of Bruno's is a popular one around here. I'm not a big fan of Bruno's. It's okay. There is a Jets Pizza around here. I've never had Jets Pizza, so I don't know if that's good or not.
It's decent. Yeah, it's decent.
It's like normal, like Papa John's, Fat Jacks. Domino's type of thing.
I think Jets, you can get Detroit style pizza there too. But like now there's so many different, you can get so many different styles at one place now that it's kind of get a little bit of everything.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, Detroit pizza, I'm not a fan of either. Yeah. So there you go. Polito's is the place I go to for pizza in town. Polito's or Rocco's is where I normally go for pizza. I have to give Starlight another shot, especially this is right down the street from my house. There's this new pizza place down the street from my house called like Rossini's or something like that. There was a Little Caesars that was there, and they took over the Little Caesars, but I haven't had it yet. I'm hoping it's good. Hoping it's good.
John A1, in terms of skill set, how does Eli Raridan fit into the offense Mike Denbrock wants to run at Notre Dame? How does he compare to former tight ends, skill set wise, and Coach Denbrock's offenses?
Well, I mean, if you think about Denbrock's offense, the first go round at Notre Dame didn't really use the tight end a ton. And I've talked about this. I mean, 2014, they had Ben Koyak caught like 30 balls, and that was, I mean, they didn't throw the ball a whole lot to the other tight ends. I think trying to think of who the other tight ends were on that roster. I'm pulling it up now. I think Nick Wisher might have caught a couple balls. But yeah, Ben Koyak had 30 catches for 317 yards. Durham Smythe had 1 catch. That's the only other tight end that caught the ball that year. They only caught 31 passes. The next year, you had Durham Smythe got hurt in the opener or the second game of the year. And then after your depth wasn't good. After that, you had Alize Mack caught 13 passes. Wisher caught 3. And that was it. So he didn't really use the tight end a ton during his tenure. He had Mason Taylor at Louisville. Now, there were years at Cincinnati, I think one year they had 2 tight ends that caught the ball a lot, and Leonard Taylor and Josh Wiley, and then there was a Josiah DeGura, I think, had a lot of production a couple years there too. So I think it's typical Denbrock. If he has tight ends that need to be a focal point, he'll make them a focal point.
Yeah.
Mason Taylor to me is a little different than Eli Raritan and as far as their skill set, but they can be used similarly. I think he'd like to have a tight end that can work the seams. I think he'd like the tight end that can be sort of a bit of a one-on-one matchup advantage down the field, a tight end that can get to the middle of the field and be a third down weapon. I think he'd like to have a tight end that can run their read zone screen, Y under 2. They'll run inside zone. Tight end will work backside like it's a split flow. It's not. He'll work past the edge and then get out in the flat. If the end, it's normal read. If the end comes down, you pull it and you get outside. You run and you're setting up a little screen. If they play the screen, then you just tuck it and you run as a quarterback. We didn't see them run that a ton because Riley had trouble hitting that early in the season. And I think we'll see more of that next year with Eli Raritan and the other tight ends. I could see that being more part of the offense next season. But I think he fits it well. But I also think Mike Denbrock can be adaptable with those type of things, and he'll use a tight end a certain way. But I don't think Mike Denbrock's going to ever have the tight end with the kind of production that we saw from like a Michael Mayer or Tyler Eifert, unless you have a freak star Michael Mayer or Tyler Eifert. I don't think he's going to force feed the tight end the football the way that Tommy Rees did. I don't think it's bad that Tommy Rees did that. You should do that when Michael Mayer is your best pass catcher. It just, if they go a couple games and the tight ends don't catch the ball a lot except on checkdowns and a couple routes, I don't think he's going to be like, oh my God, we got to figure out how to get the tight end the ball more. I think it's just kind of he's going to be part of the package, and some weeks he's going to get the ball a lot, and some weeks he's not, unless you have a stud.
Mm-hmm. When you go, like, some of it too, you also have to look at like the surrounding talent. When I think of usage of tight ends, like you think of guys like Tyler Eifert, and the receiving core in 2012 for Notre Dame was like nothing to write home about. They weren't bad. Tavares Daniels, TJ Jones, John Goodman, like they were fine, but it wasn't Malachi Fields. It wasn't Jaden Greathouse. It wasn't, then you look in 2022 when Michael Mayer was literally probably the only downfield passing threat that team used. So some of it is, dependent on the talent that's around you, but it all kind of feeds into Brian's point. Mike Denbrock will adjust to what the offense dictates, I suppose. I'm sure they didn't want to be using Mitchell Evans this year on tight end screens on 3rd and short, but it's what Riley was comfortable throwing. So they would do it from time to time.
Yeah. Somebody just said this. Clam pizza with white sauce is low key fantastic. I will honestly never know. I can promise you, I will never be able to evaluate that one way or the other. That sounds horrible.
I was about to say, so you basically just made a clam chowder pizza?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, there's something out there for everybody, man.
Yeah. And that's the thing about pizza is you can take in so many different directions.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, she and I have very different tastes in pizza outside of we both love New York style cheese pizza, right? But like she'll get stuff with like pineapples, ham, and barbecue sauce.
Ooh, and like a little Hawaiian action?
Yeah. Is that what it is? Yeah. And I'm like, pineapple on a pizza, barbecue sauce on a pizza? No, thank you. But she loves it. And I'm just like, I'll see other people. It's like, man, you guys are ruining that pizza with all that mess on it. I'm pepperoni mushroom or just cheese. That's how I am.
Lauren gets bougie with her pizza toppings. Like she's rocking with sun-dried tomatoes and arugula and garlic roasted chicken. And I'm like, dude, just give me some pepperoni or sausage, man.
So if y'all came over our house, we'd be fine because me and you would just rock a normal pizza. And then we get Angela and Lauren rock some of that nonsense that they like. Because the other thing is I love mushrooms on the pizza, but I can't split a mushroom pizza with Ange because she's allergic to mushrooms. So we can't go like halves. Where normally we would because she can't have it.
I like mushrooms on a pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty basic when it comes to that.
John A1, do you see potential for Josh Burnham to grow as a pass rusher? Does he have skill sets in that area that haven't been tapped into? Bend, first step, etc.
Yeah, I think so. Look, one thing, I think that Al Washington did a lot of good things with the D line this year. We've talked about that, but I think next year we need to see him add more onto the repertoire of his offense, of his defensive linemen. And I'm watching like other teams play, and I'm watching their double moves, and I'm watching how they use their hands, and whether it's rushing wide and then getting a club, a throw by over guys oversetting and ripping inside, whether it's wide set, working back inside, spin moves, a lot of things that we're just not seeing. Javonte Jean-Baptiste had some of that stuff, but he was taught that at Ohio State by Larry Johnson.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see on the edge, like more of a repertoire, getting more tools in the tool belt. Even Bubacar, he just won because he just was explosive off the edge. He could beat you off the edge.
Yeah.
Kingston, what Kingston did this year, we saw him do in high school. That his ability to bend and get underneath and those type of things. Josh Burnham was a middle linebacker and a quarterback in high school. He was never taught any of that stuff. You've got to teach him that. Junior Tuilamaka was a middle linebacker in high school. They were not taught that. Some of those guys are going to need to be taught those moves because you've definitely got to add more tools to the tool belt. I understand why it wasn't done this year. I do get that. I'm not saying he can't teach that or doesn't teach that. I'm saying that moving forward, that definitely needs to be a point of emphasis for Coach Washington is, okay, now these guys are now going into year 3, year 2 of working with you. You're going to have to really say, okay, well, the foundation has been laid. You guys know all the basics. Now let's add to the repertoire. And those are things that I believe Josh can do. And Bryce needs a improved repertoire. Bubacar is going to need that. I mean, there's a lot of those guys that need more tools in the tool belt. That's going to be absolutely important.
Yep, absolutely. I think health is going to play a role in that too. Got to stay healthy in order to keep developing and building on the foundation that you have too. But yeah, the potential is absolutely there. He showed flashes of it this season, but yeah, definitely got to.
Okay, this is hilarious. Raymond Harton says, I question your patriotism when you start throwing fish on pizza. Might be a slight overreaction, but I get your initial gut reaction to push back on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll answer this one easy. I am Tenzin. Which do y'all like more, buy, sell, hold, or Mailbag Fridays? On Wednesday, I like buy, sell, hold more. On Friday, I like mailbags more. Give you that political answer. How you like them apples?
Word. I am Tenzin. Imagine this secondary: Blair, Talich, Moore, and Gray. Tallest secondary in college history.
Man, it's in the conversation. It's a giant secondary. You'd have Jadon 6'5", Luke Talich is 6'4", Leonard Moore 6'2", and Christian Gray 6 feet tall. Yeah, that's pretty long. The only thing that would be different is, like, let's just say this year Christian has a monster season. Don Schuler has a monster season. They both go pro, right? And you go into the next season, and let's just say they decide to move Bronte back to cornerback full time, and now Bronte starting at corner. You know what I mean? You're 6'2", 6'2", 6'4", 6'5". Yeah, it's a very long secondary.
Yeah,
very long. Or Joey O'Brien comes to Notre Dame, and he's so good he starts as a freshman. And then you're 6'4", 6'4", 6'5", and 6'2". Leonard Moore's your small guy. I don't see any of that happening, but it's just fun to talk about.
Just have a second.
It's going to be a very tall group, but I mean, there may be times where we see Luke and Jadon on the field together. I would say most likely not. I think they'll be more kind of interchangeable at certain positions with a Don Schuler in there as well. But yeah, that group would be very, very tall.
Just a secondary taller than your defensive line.
Yep. Yep.
That's so crazy.
Yep. Be taller than your linebackers for sure.
Yep. Notre Dame, it just means more. What would be your 2 deep at defensive end and defensive tackle coming out of the spring?
Well, let's work with the assumption that you won't really have a full hold on. I'm going to answer this question 2 ways. I'm going to say where I think we could be coming out of spring practically based on injuries, and then where I think we would say it looks like coming out of spring, assuming we're projecting everyone to be healthy for the start of fall camp. So the first way, just kind of how I think the spring will end based on who is going to be healthy, it'll look kind of like what we saw this year at Viper. I think you'll see I think what they'll do is they'll move Josh Burnham back to defensive end, even though the numbers at Viper are going to be thin in the spring. That's fine. Let your young guys get some work. So I'd say junior Viper with Logan Thomas working in there. I think at defensive end, you're going to see Josh Burnham and Bryce Young. At defensive tackle, I think at 3 technique, you're going to see, and again, I'm working with, until Notre Dame tells us that Jason Onye's back, I'm not going to count on Jason Onye being back. I know he's on the roster, but again, he was on the roster in the fall. He was on the roster, for the USC game. I believe he's on the roster for the playoffs, and he still wasn't part of the team. He still wasn't playing. So until they tell me he's playing, I'm just going to work with the assumption he's not playing until we hear otherwise. So I'd say at 3 technique, I'd probably say start in spring, you're going to have either Jared Dawson or Donovan Heinisch, depending on who they're going to play where. I would say at nose tackle, Gabriel Rubio or Jared Dawson. You may see them move Gabriel to 3 technique, but I have a hard time seeing Gabriel being a full-time 3 technique when he doesn't rush the quarterback better. I think he needs to be more of a nose. They may want to go differently. I could see a scenario where him and Jared Dawson are on the field together and just we're going to be big and physical and we're going to shut down the run. So I could see that as well. So D tackle, it's essentially some variation of Jared Dawson, Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch, and Armo Mukum or Elijah Hughes. Say one of those guys is going to battle. That would be my 2 deep at defensive tackle, and there's going to be some interchangeableness to who plays where. That would be my 2 deep coming out of spring with everybody back. Now, things change a little bit when you get Bubacar and Botelho back. And obviously they're going to be your guys there. In that scenario, I think you'll see Jordan Botelho still start at Viper if he's healthy. And I think what you'll see there is they're going to play Bubacar all over the field. And they were starting to do that before Botelho got hurt. They were starting to play him at field end and Viper and basically just saying we're going to have different matchups where we're going to get Bubacar on the field against where you're not going to know where he's going to be because he's such a unique player because he's twitchy enough to play Viper. He's got the body of an end as well, and I think you'll see him continue to be that guy that kind of plays all over that position next season. So that would be my projected 2 deep if those guys are back, and if Onye's back and his head's on straight and he's good to go, and I hope that he is. All of a sudden, I feel a lot better about the D tackle position, but I need to see that before I believe it. I need to see him in pads and Marcus Freeman saying, "Yep, he's part of the team again." Before I'm going to get too excited about that part.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you are. That would be exactly what my 2 deep would be as well. John A1, based on potential, choose your top 3 players you hope make a major jump in the spring based on positive impact on the team.
CJ Carr, Cam Williams, Bryce Young. And I picked them because, well, CJ's obvious. I think he's got the most talented quarterback. If you want to insert Kenny for CJ, fine. One of those 2 young quarterbacks has a big jump. If that happens, this team is going to be scary good. If you talk about Cam Williams, you could also insert KK into this, but it's a young guy that gives you game breaker speed. That has a big impact on the team, positive impact on the team. And then if Bryce Young has a major jump, just like that, you've got an elite edge rusher on your football team. Now, he's got a ways to go to get there. I mean, for all the things that Bryce did and all the flash that he showed this year and the potential that he showed this year, the reality is the kid had 3 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. That's it. But you could see the talent, Trevor. That's why every week we're like predicting this could be the week that Bryce, you can see it. And with a good offseason, he could make that kind of jump. He's got that kind of talent. But if you do, all of a sudden, could you imagine playing in the playoff next year against whoever, and you got Bryce Young and Bubacar coming at you on 3rd down off the edges? Or Bryce goes inside or Bubacar goes inside and you put a Jalen Sneed, a Logan Thomas, a Kingston on the edge with Bubacar. Oh, my gosh. You start saying, that's the kind of edge rush you need to have an elite 4-man pass rush. And can you imagine how good Notre Dame's secondary would be if Chris Ash is as good as Marcus Freeman thinks he is? Could you imagine how good the pass defense is going to be if you can get after the quarterback with 4 down linemen? oh my goodness, you start getting fired up about it. So now you could throw Jadon Blair in there. You could throw to me, you could throw Gerby Lambert into that conversation. I mean, there's other guys, Keidron Young, but I think those three, one of the two young quarterbacks, Cam Williams or KK, one of those two guys, and then Bryce Young to me. Bryce Young or Armel, that would be the ones I would go with on defense. Bryce Young or Armel Mukum really having that big jump would be huge for this football team. That's where I would go.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I definitely have more than three. If I had to choose a top three, one of Kenny or CJ, I think that you could make a really strong, compelling argument that you hope both make a big jump in the spring. You know, I mean, I think I've made my thoughts known along with Brian. You know, like I think the future could be CJ, right? Like, I mean, the talent's there, the potential's there. But again, if a guy like Kenny Minchie or even Steve beats him out in a fair, equal competition, I mean, that bodes well for just the team as a whole, right? One of the young receivers, whether that be Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, Logan Saldate, KK Smith, one of those guys. And then on defense, I'm with you on Bryce Young, with you in somebody in the safety room, no matter who it is, right? Because Jalen Stroman's coming in, but he's coming back off of injury. Adon Schuler is who he is, and he's going to be a standout player in 2025. But one of Luke Talich or Jadon Blair or, you know, Tate Johnson, Kennedy Urlacher, somebody just emerges, and you know what I mean? So that would be massive as well. So just any combination of any of the guys I just listed, any of those three would be my top three.
I got one for you that's outside the box a little bit. Eric Schmidt.
Okay.
Yep.
I like that. I am Tenzin. Notre Dame will obviously have the best running back room in the nation this season. Will they be considered the top room for multiple consecutive years after this?
The top room? No. A top room? Yes. I mean, look, because I expect Jeremiah to be gone after next year. I don't think he'll be here senior year. If he is, I hope it's just because he just doesn't want to leave college, and it's not because he had an injury. That would be my hope. And there's a chance you could also see Jadarian leave after next year to go to the NFL. I mean, I could see them both going to the NFL after next season. And then you're going to have Keidron and Aeneas, and there's going to be question marks. But I think by that point in time, I think Notre Dame will have earned a reputation because of how much we will still seek Aeneas and Keidron, that, hey, these guys are the next in line.
Yeah.
Because I think people are starting to I hope that people start to recognize, like, hey, guys, this running back success in Notre Dame didn't just start with Jeremiah and Jadarian. I mean, there's this cat named Audric Estime that was pretty good the year before. And then before him, there was this cat named Kyron Williams, who was, I was about to say Aeneas Williams because they similar. And, you know, Kyron Williams, who was a pretty good player. And before that, there was this cat named Josh Adams, who was a pretty good player. And before that, there was this cat named CJ Prosise, who was a pretty good player, right? I mean, you know, and oh, by the way, there's this cat that played back in the 90s named Jerome Bettis that was pretty good. And Reggie Brooks. I mean, Notre Dame's put some dudes out there at running back. And I don't think they get the respect that they deserve for the success they've had recently. I mean, people act like Notre Dame hasn't been having like 1,000-yard runners like constantly over the last 10 years.
Right.
I mean, you had CJ in 2015, Josh in 2017. He was a Heisman candidate going into the month of November. Dexter would have been a 1,000-yard rusher if he didn't miss 4. He rushed for over 900 yards and missed 4 games because of suspension. You had Kyron had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. You know, Logan and Audric both went over 800 yards in 2022. Audric breaks out with a 1,000-yard year in 2023. Jeremiah Love breaks out with a 1,000-yard year in 2024. And let's be honest, if Jeremiah Love wasn't around, if Jadarian Price wasn't around, Jeremiah probably goes for 1,300 yards at least. If Jeremiah Love's not around, Jadarian goes for 1,000 yards in the season that they had. Like, this isn't new. Now, I think these guys are more dynamic than a lot of those other backs. But Notre Dame didn't, like, just miraculously start having good backs when Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price showed up. And I think that people are going to start to recognize that. And then they're going to see the flashes from Aeneas and Keidron and start to say, like, yeah, those are 2 big losses, but I think Notre Dame's going to be just fine at running back. You know, and then Nolan James is coming along, and, you know, in 25, who I like a lot. We'll see who they get in 26. But, I mean, if you go look at who Dylan McCullough visited this week, My man is big game hunting a running back in his class. Like, he went out and saw some dudes this week.
Yeah.
Jonas Walton, Jonathan Hutton. He saw Javion Osborne. He's going to see Javion Mallory today. He saw DeZephan Walker this week, who's a top 100 type of guy. He went out and saw some dudes this week at running back. So I don't think this is going to slow down anytime soon. So, yeah, I think that they will be considered one of the best moving forward, not the – I mean, I don't know you can consider them the best if they lose Jeremiah and or Jadarian. You know, I mean, you're going to be like, they're going to reload, but you're not going to say they're the best coming back that next season unless there was an injury and somebody steps up and balls out, and you look at it that way.
Brandon Plesner, how many offensive linemen do you see the staff taking in 2026? The interior targets seem to be locked down. So who are the tackles you see Notre Dame legitimately battling for?
It's a great question. I am a little concerned about the current plan for filling out the class. If I've been told that they're going to take 4, and based on the feedback that was given, it sounds like if Gregory Patrick wanted to commit, they'd take him. I think that would be a huge mistake. Not because Gregory Patrick's not really good, but if you're going to take Gregory Patrick, then you need to take 5 linemen because you need a pure tackle in this class. Maybe Gregory Patrick can play tackle. Maybe Ben Nichols could play tackle. Maybe Sullivan Garvin could play tackle. But you basically just landed 4 interior players. And I think you need to go to 5. And I know they took 3 tackles last year, but you can't have enough tackles on your roster because tackles can move inside and play guard. And it's just and played at an elite level. I mean, Alex Bars started at right tackle in 2016, moved inside to right guard at 17, and was even better. I mean, we've seen this time and time again. And so it would concern me a little bit. Now, if they're okay going to 5, like if they say this, look, Gregory Patrick is too good to pass up. We're going to take him also, but we're going to now expand the class to 5 and get a more pure tackle. Totally fine with that. That'd be a heck of an offensive line class, an outstanding offensive line class. And if they got Gregory Patrick, I'd say, look, take position out of the mix. That's an outstanding 4-man class. The problem is you have to put a 5-man offensive line together, and I don't see a scenario where those 4 are starting together in an offensive line, and you feel great about the position that they're all 4 playing. That would be my issue. But if you get those 4 and you still want to say, hey, we're going to still recruit Akene Igboko, you're going to still recruit, Felix Ojo, guys like that, cool. I'll feel good about it. I'll feel much better about it because then you give me a 1 pure tackle in the class, and then between him and then maybe one of the other 4 could potentially play right tackle, you feel like you're putting a group together that could be pretty good. That's how I view that one. And I just mentioned some of the tackle targets, Akene Ojobo, Felix Ojo, Akene Ogboku, Aboko. You have Evan Goodwin, who just got offered this past week from Pulaski County out in Arkansas. They are recruiting Claude and Puma, who hasn't been offered yet, but he's a guy that I would have on my radar. He's 6'8", 305, really nimble feet, more of a basketball player now than a football player. He doesn't dominate on the football field yet, but the tools are just there, Trev, where it's like this is some 3-star kid that goes to Iowa, and in 3 years he's a first-team All-Big Ten guy and a future first-round NFL draft pick.
Sure.
Or he's a guy that goes to Iowa and we never hear from him again. Like he's got kind of like that boomer bust guy, you know what I mean? I would have him on my radar and keep recruiting him and see what kind of attitude he has and what kind of drive he has and get to know him a lot better. But there's some things you see where you're like, man, this guy's raw, and you'd be taking a bit of a chance with him. But like my thing is when you got Gerby and Styles in the 24 class, you follow that up with Will Black, Matty Augustine, and Owen Strebig in the next class, I'd be okay saying, hey, if you think there's a project type of kid that maybe won't be highly ranked, but you think, hey, we don't need to take a tackle that's going to play right away. We're pretty good at tackle. We like where we're at tackle. We're going to take a shot on this kid because if he booms, he's a top 15 NFL draft pick. If he doesn't boom or he busts, we're okay because we're pretty good there.
Sure.
I would be okay with that in this class because of how well they've recruited tackle the previous years and because you've recruited, the interior so well. But I still think you need a tackle, even if it is that kind of guy. You don't just go not get a tackle. That's kind of where I'm coming from on it. So that's where I would be with my group. And somebody just brought up, you're correct. I also forgot about Tony Jones who almost rushed for 1,000 yards in 2019 and played in the NFL for. Actually, I think he's still in the NFL right now. He played. I saw him. He played for somebody this year.
I know he was with the Saints for a while. He might still be there.
I think they cut him. I think I saw him running for somebody else this year. The Cardinals, maybe. Let me go look. Yeah, he was with the Cardinals this year and last year. He's with the Saints from 20 to 22, and then Seattle Saints, and then last 2 years Cardinals. But yeah, Tony Jones, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. He's been in the NFL for 5 years collecting paychecks. That means he now has a pension in the NFL. So, yeah, Notre Dame's done a pretty good job of producing running backs in Nashville. Have they produced any stars? We're getting close with the way Kyron's played the last couple of years.
Yeah, Kyron's been balling.
Yeah, so, we'll see. Maybe Audric has a breakout second year for the Broncos. We'll see. But, yeah, but that's my thoughts on the offensive line recruiting, Trevor. Again, it's not like if they take Gregory Patrick, I'm like, oh, this is not a good class. It's 4 talented football players. It's just, can they play together?
Sure.
That would be more of my question. And if one of your tackles from last year doesn't pan out or gets hurt, now you're in trouble. And that's the concern. If everything goes perfectly, yeah, you're fine not taking another tackle in this class. But how often do things go perfectly? We've already seen Styles Prescott miss time. So I just don't think you could go there.
Irish Gordy, not. Do you have a good comp for Joey O'Brien?
Cam Hart. Just he's the guy you have to pick somebody tall.
Sauce Gardner was like 6'4".
No, he's not that tall.
Sauce?
He's not that tall.
I'm almost positive he's 6'4".
Hold on a second.
He's 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". Tariq Woolen is like 6'4".
Let me see. I don't think Sauce is that. I think he's like 6'3", 6'2", 6'3". Let me see here. What do you do at the combine? 6'3", 190. But that's still freaking really tall. I'll say this. Joey O'Brien's a lot thicker than Sauce was coming out, because you've heard the stories about how Sauce was $140 when he showed up at Cincinnati. But that kind of smooth. He's smart. He'll hit you. He can play multiple positions. He's a really good football player. There's not a lot of guys that are built like that, in my opinion. Who'd you say who's the other one?
I know Tariq Woolen is really tall.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think back in the day, Lenny Walls, but I think Joey O'Brien's a much smoother athlete than Lenny Walls was. Richard Sherman might not be a bad one.
Yeah.
Similar, because he also played receiver. Joey plays receiver. So some decent ones, just because they're all tall.
ND, it just means more. Which of the linebackers do you think will break into the rotation next year and have an impact?
So that would assume that means guys that aren't in it now. I think Madden Frame will have a shot to do that. I hope Preston Zender's not playing linebacker this year. I really hope they move him somewhere else. But, Madden Faramo is the first guy that pops in my head because the guy's already there. I would have gone with Bodie Cahoon if he didn't get hurt, and I don't know the status of his recovery. Potentially Teddy Rizak, just because he's so athletic and rangy. I could see him kind of finding like a nickel defender type of role where he covers, plays in space, can blitz off the edge. I could see something like that for Teddy as being a new guy breaking into that position. But yeah, Bodie Cahoon, I heard some good things about prior to him getting injured late in the year. And the reason that it's a question mark is because he got hurt in November, and that's just like the worst time to get hurt.
Yeah, that's tough. Jacob Sweat, love you guys. Aeneas had a great year. Do you think he would start at most Power 4 schools? And what percentage would you give of at least one running back transfer after spring ball?
I'm going to keep saying this, guys. I'm not going to answer questions about transfers. I don't know. I don't want to start speculating. I don't think it's fair to speculate. I don't think because here's how it works. If I say I think so-and-so might transfer, it'll eventually get back to different boards as Brian Driscoll said that so-and-so is going to transfer after the spring. Like, I never said that. I said I could see this guy if this, and I just don't want to do that. I want to focus on these guys committed to be on the team for the spring, and they're going to battle their tails off. And I'm going to talk about the battle and analyze the battle. And if someone decides to leave, I will then address that. But I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about who may or may not transfer. So I don't really care to put it. And Jacob, your question is fine. I understand where you're coming from, and there's nothing wrong with you talking about that at all. I just feel like in my position, it's unfair for me to talk about that just because of how it would then get used. And I hope you understand that. Transfers are just a part of the game. There will be transfers at the end of the spring. I don't want to start getting into this position, that position, because I just think that'd be unfair. As far as Aeneas, do I think he could start for most Power 4 teams? I don't know about most yet. Would he play and be a rotation guy on most Power 4 teams right now? Yes, I do believe that. Could he start on a lot of Notre Dame's opponents next year? Good chunk of them. Yeah, I mean, Aeneas is a good football player, man. Kedron's a good football player. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, again, I'll have a better sense of once we go through the rosters, but like, I know Miami lost their stud running back. I think Aeneas could play for them. Start, I'm not sure. Texas A&M, he'd be in their rotation. Start, did Le'Veon Moss come back? Is Amari Daniels back? Like, that's kind of part of the conversation. USC, with what they lost, I think Aeneas would start for them. And then, of course, a lot of the lower tier teams he would start for. I think Boise State would love to have an Aeneas Williams step in and replace Ashton Genty. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think he'd play for a ton of those teams. Absolutely. So you guys kill me. You heard it here first, guys. Brian said so-and-so will transfer. Somebody said so-and-so was a bum anyways. That's okay. That's awesome. And that's great. Thank you for that, guys. Yeah. Indy Muffin can't lose so-and-so and so-and-so, Jason. That's great. You guys are killing me. Wasn't so-and-so a 5-star recruit, though? You guys are awesome. Only wanted NIL money anyways. I love you guys. You guys rock.
I'm not even going to lie. I was reading that in the chat, and I was like, who is so-and-so? I was like, was he a part of a class that I missed? I was like, ooh. All right.
Yeah. You guys are funny. I love that.
That's funny.
I love
That's
that.
Good.
I want to say, hey, Jacob, just man, I hope you don't take my transfer thing as a shot at you at all. It's not meant to be. It's just trying to get you guys to understand. I'm just not going to speculate on transfers. When guys transfer, I'll talk about it. Do I think some people will transfer? Sure. Do I think that it'll be a running back or a receiver or quarterback? I don't have no idea. I hope they all stay. I'm also not naive to believe that will happen. I just don't want to spend a lot of time speculating on what may happen after the spring when we've got the whole spring to talk about. I even say, hey, well, this guy's going to transfer out, but then that guy has a great spring, and all of a sudden he's competing to start in the fall. And then I wasted all this time talking about how he might transfer. I just don't want to get into that. But your question is totally fair, totally fine, and I understand it. It's not that I'm like, oh, come on, Jacob, don't ask me those questions. I'm not saying that at all. I just want you guys to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Jason Smith, would you rather have a quarterback that's an elite processor and an average arm, or a cannon arm and average processing?
I mean, literally in college football, you could have ended it at elite processor, and I don't need to hear the other context. My answer is I would always have a guy that's an elite processor, unless he has a rag arm. Like, I mean, Danny Warfel's a perfect example. I had a better arm than Danny Warfel coming out, and when we were both in college, similar time, he was a year or two ahead of me. I had a better arm than Danny Warfel had. He was a way better quarterback than I was because he was an elite processor. So yeah, give me an elite processor with an average arm, and here's the thing. There's some context not here. He can't be a stiff in the pocket either. Like, if you give me like a quality athlete, like I don't think Steve Angeli has a great arm. He's got an okay arm, but if Steve Angeli was an elite processor, I'd have a very different opinion of him than I do now. My issue with Steve is the processing. Like Jimmy Clausen didn't have a bazooka for an arm, but he was an elite processor. And that's what made him so good. And in college football, Mac Jones didn't have a big arm. I'd say he had better than an average arm, but he didn't have a big arm, but he was an elite processor in college, and he had elite talent around him, and that's why he did what he did. So in college, I never want an average processor in the Notre Dame system. There are some offenses where that's okay. In Rich Rodriguez's offense, if you're an elite athlete with an elite arm, a cannon for an arm, and an average processor as a passer, you'll be a star. You'll be a star. Because it's a different type of offense. But in the Notre Dame offense, I think I would much rather have an elite processor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you go back through, Joe Burrow, you could add he was an elite processor, but he's not somebody that is known for his arm strength.
Yeah, definitely not an average arm, but yeah, correct. He doesn't have Justin Fields' arm strength.
Well, it's like, and then you go and think of like guys that are known for having a cannon arm. Joe Milton had an absolute rocket launcher for an arm, but not
pretty terrible quarterback. Jim Druckenmiller, Jamarcus Russell, Kyle Bowler. There's been a lot of guys with bazookas for arms that were terrible quarterbacks because they couldn't read defenses. Mm-hmm. Kyle Bowler would sit at the 50-yard line and throw the ball from his knee over the uprights, over the the goalposts. Wow, that's impressive. Can you read a defense? Can you throw the ball accurately? No and no. Well, then you're not a very good quarterback. So yeah. Yep. All right, let's get to some more here. And somebody just said they think CJ Carr is the best processor on the team. I would say that's probably accurate, but Kenny Minchie's not far behind. Kenny Minchie's got pretty high football IQ as well.
Question in here from Broke Neck Boy. Will the NCAA finally punish Michigan? Would an all-star college football playoff team be able to beat 2019 LSU?
No, the NCAA will never do anything to Michigan. They will put up a fight to make it look like they're fighting, and then as soon as it gets to certain parts of the courts, they'll cower and back out. That's what they'll do. Would an all-star college football team be able to beat 2019 LSU? Of course. Auburn almost beat LSU that year. Texas almost beat LSU that year. So, yes, an all-star college football, an all-star SEC team would have beat LSU that year. If you took all the best players in the SEC and put them on one team, and they had a season to prepare, like a fall, playing in the opener of the 2019 season, you take all the best players in the SEC and you put them on one team, they play LSU, they're going to beat LSU. It's of course they would. LSU is a great team, one of the best ever, but they're not beating an all-star team of anybody. It's not happening. Just like you could take an all-star team of college players and go have them play against the worst NFL team, and they're still not going to win. It's just a different level of football when you're talking. That's one team that had weaknesses. You take an all-star team from the SEC or the college football, they don't have weaknesses. You're literally taking the best at every position. That team's not losing to any one team. It's not happening.
JPEL12, apologies if it's too general, but how do the coaching tenures of Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame differ in terms of leadership style and program culture?
Well, Marcus Freeman has been much more hands-on. There's a different level of accountability, in my opinion, under Marcus Freeman's tenure. The program culture is different because there's a level of this coach has our back that did not exist under Brian Kelly. That's a really the big thing about it is, look, guys, I was told this by a captain and a starter. So my sources aren't just disgruntled parents. I talked to a lot of people, and I remember being told this by a guy that played in the NFL who was a multi-year starter and a team captain at Notre Dame that told me this. He said, and this has been confirmed by plenty of people, he said Brian Kelly would welcome us back in January from winter break, and then we wouldn't see him again until right before spring ball. Our head coach was Matt Bayless and Clark Lee. That's who our head coaches were. Wow. That's who led our program, and Matt Bayless being the primary. That's how they viewed it. You talk to a lot, not all of them, but you talk to a lot of players, and they'll tell you the same exact thing. Oh, Matt Bayless was our head coach, basically. for most of the season, we never saw Brian Kelly. We'd see Matt Bayless and we see the assistant coaches. And that's how the culture was established was with those guys, not with Brian Kelly. And that's what Marcus Freeman has to always avoid, because the distraction, the problem at Notre Dame is you're pulled in so many different directions. You have so many obligations outside of your football team that it can get very difficult. And I'm not even completely banging on Brian Kelly for this, because part of that's your job. It's just you can't make it so much of your job that your players go that long of a time and they really don't see you. And that's where you can't have that.
Yeah.
You can't have that at all. He says, how do you – hold on a second, because he said something from Akshat Shakar. Thank you very much for the super chat. How do you evaluate how well or not Craig and Shrouth scaled up against their play against tougher opponents in the CFP? I think he meant Coogan.
Yeah, he corrected it in the chat.
So, Trev, thoughts on that? I'm going to let you kind of answer this one because I've been answering a bunch of these.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, how well or not they scaled up their play against tougher opponents. I mean, with Billy, he had certain games where he was pretty decent. Like sometimes it was a tale of two different halves. Like against Penn State, he did not play well in the first half, played really well in the second half, but the competition didn't change. He was still going against, Javon J. Thomas and Zane Durant. He started executing better. I think with Coogan, you started to see a little bit more of the talent gap, because I don't think Billy Shrouth went up against many players in the CFP where it was like, that guy's just better. You know what I mean? But then you could kind of see it a little bit with Coogan. I mean, the biggest one was against Georgia when he was nose up with Nazir Stackhouse. And that was one where, and it's not like he was missing assignments. It wasn't for a lack of effort. It's just
he's playing his butt off. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You just look at it and it's like, that guy's just better than our guy. You know what I'm saying? If you're a coach on that staff. And so, that's kind of how I would evaluate them. Like I think their level of play remained like the same. It's not like it was monumentally worse. I think the level of competition raised, but I think the difference between Coogan and Shrouth is Shrouth, it was definitely more a little bit of execution. I don't know if he went up against somebody that was like, well, that guy's just better. But with Pat Coogan, there were some where it's like Zane Durant just kind of had your number on that one, man. Nazir Stackhouse just kind of had your number on that one.
And there's not a lot you can do about it.
Right.
You're giving me everything you got. I mean, that's one of those ones where you're in the film room afterwards and you're in between series and you're just like, okay, how do we adjust this? How do we help Pat out? We can't ask him, hey man, you got to play. With Billy, a lot of times it's like, dude, why would you sit there and let that guy get a running start at you and just take that hit? You're better than that. Because I saw you whoop that guy the last series. He whooped you this series. It's not because he's just better than you. Pat Coogan played as hard as he could play against Georgia. Those guys were just better than he was. With Billy, it's more of an inconsistency of technical skill, and he doesn't always play with certainty. You can tell the games where Billy Shrouth isn't sure what he's supposed to do because he plays slower and less physical. You can also tell the games when Billy's locked in because he is dominant. And that's what he's going to have to correct. And again, this is his first year as a full-time starter, and then he missed the middle third of the season. So it's understandable. It's just that's his level of growth, which to Trevor's point is if Billy knows what he's doing, he can go toe-to-toe with anybody. Pat Coogan can know exactly what's about to happen, and there's just guys that are going to whoop his butt. It didn't matter how hard he tried. Zeke Biggers was just better than he was. It's just that's the way that it was. And same thing with, like you mentioned, Zane Durant, same thing with Nazir Stackhouse. And Nazir wasn't the only one that got him, but he was the primary one that got him. And it was the same way at times. Actually, there's a couple plays where I thought Tyleek Williams got him, but I actually thought he held his own against Ohio State in the title game.
Yeah, I thought, like, as a whole, the offensive line played pretty decent against Ohio State. Like, there was a few wins by Ohio State here and there, but it wasn't like they just had no answer type.
Yeah, and there's a couple times you're like, dude, if you would have read that counter correctly, that sucker might go. Yeah, there was one like where Emil got beat off the edge pretty easily because he didn't step properly. There was one time where Charles got beat around on a double move, but when you're playing those guys, you're going to have some losses. to your point, Trev, I think overall they more than held their own against Ohio State.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought both lines battled in that game.
I just keep thinking about that G scheme when Spindler pulled and then went inside shade of Jagasaw. If he goes outside and gets a body on Cody Simon, that leaves Price
because Price was waiting for him to pop it. You could see Jadarian like waiting on him, and then we didn't. You could see like Jadarian kind of like, oh shoot, like I thought he was going to go out, and then he pops out by himself. He just runs into the line because he's following the guard, but he knew that Rocco should have bounced that sucker, and if he does, man,
might still be running.
He might be home by now. Yeah, that was a big one. But that was an execution mistake. That wasn't a you got your butt whooped mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Mark Avalone, ex-lineman versus ex-skill player coaches as head coaches, pros and cons and differences.
If you take quarterback out of the skill player conversation and make it its own thing, I'd say linemen and skill players tend to be better position coaches. Just like on defense, like linebackers tend to be better coordinators and coaches than corners or safeties. And safeties kind of can. But on offense, I think a lot of it comes down to the nature of the position. When you are a receiver, a lot of times you're just kind of getting by on talent. And you're kind of off on an island by yourself, kind of doing your own thing. You kind of know what the other receivers are doing, but you don't know anything about protections. There's a lot of things like that. You don't know, why do a lot of former quarterbacks become coaches? Because literally a quarterback has to know what everybody's doing, how things work, why things work. They've got to understand, like the quarterback's got to understand the receiver can't be 7 feet off the edge. He's got to be 5 feet off the edge. Because I remember Mike Elko explaining, we were talking one time about, I think it was a Stanford game in 17, and he was real frustrated by what happened with a safety because he's going through it, and literally he's talking to me about how the safety should have recognized that the receiver was 5 yards outside the tackle and not 7 to 8, because whenever the receiver was 5 yards off the tackle, they only ran these 3 routes. And we were prepared for that, and the receiver bid on a move, and he's like, he never should have been on that move. So like a left tackle doesn't understand that. A quarterback knows that. I need you here, line up here. He has to understand defenses. He has to understand fronts, coverages, all of that. I think there's a lot of that to the offensive line as well. It's just more of a thinking man's position than is receiver. It's not doesn't mean you're not as smart. It just means the demands of your position are different. That's why I don't know of a lot of former defensive linemen that are coordinators or head coaches. There's some, but there's not a lot. See a lot of former linebackers that are D coordinators and that. You see a lot of former safeties that are defensive coordinators, not a lot of corners. And because it's just a different type of animal. It's like catcher in baseball. Why do catchers tend to make really good managers? Because catchers are the one position that has to know what everybody else is doing. You ever see in the major league, catchers are like getting outfielders lined up. You know what I mean? Like they understand sequencing of pitching and play calling and all that kind of stuff. It's just more of a thinking man's position than other positions. It doesn't mean they tend to be smarter as people or whatever. It's just the nature of that position and the demands of that position require you to do more things that then lead to you being successful as a football coach. And that would be my explanation for why. So if you're going to include quarterback and skill player, then give me skill players. If you're going to take quarterback out of that, I go lineman, because I think linemen tend to kind of understand things as head coaches a little bit more than maybe a skill player. Linemen understand the importance of camaraderie, playing together, working together, practicing together. Much more than some of those other positions.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The one caveat that I will say about the quarterback position, when you get to like an elite level, and it's funny that this question was in here because I was talking about this with a buddy a couple weeks ago, but I do think that once you reach a certain level, I do think there's reasons why guys like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Joe Montana never went into coaching either, because they know what's going on. But I think for coaching wise, like it's just hard to relay onto what they know and expect. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I'm
it's like
saying once you reach a certain level.
the great players in basketball. I think basketball is very similar. Outside of Larry Bird, how many great players became great coaches?
Yeah.
I think Jason Kidd's had some success as a coach, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think, didn't he have a team that went to the NBA finals or so? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Like a lot of great NBA coaches were like Magic was a terrible coach, terrible executive. Michael Jordan was a terrible executive. I mean, a lot of the greats weren't great coaches. And the same thing is true in football because Peyton Manning can't teach his quarterback to be him.
Right.
John Elway can't teach a quarterback to be him, play the game the way that I played the game. Mm-hmm. It's different. The reason that I think that Larry Bird is because Larry Bird didn't have the elite athletic skill that a Michael Jordan had. Mm-hmm. You know, and so there's you look at a lot of that in a lot of sports. The elite of the elite players, Mark McGwire wasn't a great hitting coach. You know, it's like why? Because Mark McGwire, I can't teach you to do what I did.
Right.
You know, I think you see that a lot. That doesn't mean that there's not exceptions to the rule. Of course there are, but there's a reason it tends to be that way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a conversation that we were having. I was like, that's why guys like Zach Taylor, the head coach for the Bengals, like he was a quarterback at Nebraska, but he wasn't fantastic. He wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, Jim Harbaugh was a quarterback. You know, he played, he started close. In the NFL.
He's close to that. Steve Spurrier, somebody just said Steve Spurrier is one of the few exceptions. That's true. Steve Spurrier won a Heisman Trophy and was a great coach. But what position did he play? Quarterback.
Yeah.
But Steve Spurrier also wasn't a great NFL player. He was an average NFL player. Didn't have much of an NFL career. But yes, your point stands. I think like Jim Harbaugh is one of the few examples of a guy who was a pretty good NFL player for a long time that became a good football coach. But he wasn't an elite talent. You know, he wasn't John Elway. He wasn't Peyton Manning. He wasn't Tom Brady. He wasn't Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
You know, so like, you know, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel was a solid football player. He wasn't an elite football player. He was a tough guy. Had to know everything. Somebody just said Ted Williams was a bad manager because Ted Williams can't teach you to be him.
Right.
I think wasn't Tony Gwynn a pretty decent coach before he passed away? Wasn't he the coach at San Diego State when he passed away, or did he stop doing that? I can't remember. But I remember he had got into, but like I feel like Tony Gwynn could maybe teach the things that he taught as a baseball coach. Yeah, his last year before he passed away, they went 42-21. He led him to the regional championship those 2 years. Because I think what he did, you could kind of teach his approach, the drills, where Ted Williams just had otherworldly hand-eye coordination. And I mean, this is the same guy that literally fought as a fighter pilot in 2 different wars, and then came back. And after fighting in those wars and came back and was like an all-star. Like I'm gonna pull this up because this is just show you what I'm talking about. Ted Williams in the 1940s. So Ted Williams in 1942 hit 356, had a 499 on base percentage, had 34 doubles, 5 triples, 36 homers, 137 RBIs, 145 walks. He didn't play in 1943. 44 and 45, right in the middle of his prime, 2 years after he hit 400. Why? He was flying fighter jets in World War II, and not like, okay, you got to serve, so we'll give you some, you know, he was literally a fighter pilot in World War II, comes back after missing 3 seasons. In the 1946, Trevor hits 342, hits 37 doubles, 8 triples, 38 homers, 123 RBIs, walks 156 times, and he struck out fewer times in 1946 than he did in 1942, the last time he played. I mean, like, the guy was unreal. He was absolutely unreal, what he did. And, I mean, you just don't – you're not going to see anything like that ever again.
Yeah.
You're just not, you know, and then he flew missions in the Korean War again, missed part of his career. Like Ted Williams in the prime hit 521 home runs. In the prime of his career, he missed 3 years. That would have been years 5, 6, and 7 for him, where he fought in a war. And then also, kind of still in the prime, year after he hit 30 homers and 126 RBIs, he then missed chunks of 2 seasons because he was fighting in the Korean War. Could you imagine what his numbers would have looked like if he wouldn't have missed basically 5 seasons of prime career fighting in a war? Yeah. Could you imagine a modern athlete going and fighting in a war? And Pat Tillman's the exception. It didn't happen. It doesn't happen. But for him to come back and still you can't teach that to somebody else.
Right.
You can't teach there's one reason that Ted Williams is a great baseball player. God said, I'm going to give you something that nobody else is going to have. And you can't teach it because it is unique to you. You have a special talent. And you can't teach that. Like, other guys can teach certain things. Why Gary Kubiak John Elway's backup would have been a better coach than John Elway would have been. Because John Elway can't teach what John Elway did. You know what I mean? Like, right. 100%. It's like you see that a lot. Not always. It's not always the case, but a lot of times that's the case. Mm-hmm. Good question, Mark. That sparked a really fun discussion.
Yeah, that was good.
I still just can't get over that. Dude took 3 years off of playing Major League Baseball in his prime to fight in a war and came back after 3 years in the war and hit 342, 38 homers, 123 RBIs, walked 156 times, and only struck out 44 times after missing Major League Baseball for 3 years while fighting in a war. It's not like they were putting like batting cages on the bases he was flying off of. I don't think he was a carrier. Let me actually go look. I don't know if he was a carrier guy or if he was fighting in the land ones. That's actually an interesting question. I don't know the answer to, but I'll have to look that up one of these days. But it'd be interesting to find that out.
Yeah, you see different examples of that, and all that stuff is just crazy to me. I mean, like you think of Michael Jordan has a three-peat, goes and plays a completely different sport, comes back, and then has another three-peat.
Another three-peat. Yeah.
Like that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild.
Yeah, you got people like that are just built differently.
Yeah. He was a naval aviator. I don't see here where, it doesn't look like he was on a. He was in Korean War. He was a Marine pilot, a Marine fighter, so he wouldn't have been on a carrier in that one. So it's just wild, man. Just absolutely wild stuff.
Ronnie Reeves, unfortunately, my buy sell hold submission was missed on Wednesday, so I thought I'd ask now. Will Chris Ash keep the aggressive approach, specifically the blitzing percentage that Golden had here?
I have no idea. I mean, the reality, Ronnie, he hasn't been a coordinator in 5 years, and he did that for 1 year. And before that, he hadn't been a coordinator for 5, 6 years. In the last 10 years, so that'd be 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. In the last 10 years, he was a coordinator for 2 seasons. I don't have a clue what he's going to do. Just like I couldn't tell you what Al Golden was going to do as a coordinator based on what he did at Miami or Temple or Virginia, because it had been so long. I don't know the impact that the NFL is going to have on Chris Ash's approach. I have to think that Marcus Freeman is not hiring Chris Ash if Chris Ash doesn't believe in the philosophy that Marcus Freeman wants run on defense, which is, I would assume, is going to be aggressive. Does that mean he's going to blitz as much as Al Golden? No, because Marcus Freeman didn't blitz as much as Al Golden. It's just, but it's going to still be a similar philosophy. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm hopeful that it continues. I mean, he needs to be allowed to put his spin on. Like, Chris Ash can't be asked to do what Al Golden did because he's not Al Golden. Just like Al Golden wasn't asked to do what Marcus Freeman did. This is our philosophy. This is our defense. Run it to the best of your ability, and do it how you kind of want it. He's got to be himself. But I just have to think that Marcus Freeman would have demanded that his philosophy has to match what Marcus Freeman wants to do defensively. But he's not going to be, hey, well, Al blitz this amount of times, You have to blitz that amount of times. This is a blitz that I'll like to run. You have to like to run this blitz. He won't be effective that way. He's got to be himself. And you just hope that Coach Freeman did his due diligence to make sure that Chris Ash's philosophy is in line with what they've been doing with the personnel that they have, that he'll continue it, but he'll still tailor it to fit what he thinks is best as far as going after teams.
Yeah.
And he should be allowed to do that. He shouldn't be asked to well, here's what Al did. Here's Al's tendencies. Be Al. Because he's not. He's Chris Ash. He needs to be allowed to be Chris Ash as a designer and play caller and things like that. And which hopefully means working within a philosophy that Marcus Freeman believes in, but still being allowed to have, the freedom to run the defense the best way he sees fit, while also taking into account the coaches around you and allowing their input to also be a big factor in that, because that's what good coaches do.
Yep. Steven Springfield, one thing I might have missed, but is there any possibility that Mickens might have felt unready to be defensive coordinator after his elevated position this season?
No, and that's not a guess. No, not at all. This was a choice by Marcus Freeman. This was not Mike Mickens not wanting the job, not thinking he was ready for the job. This is Marcus Freeman thinking that Chris Ash was better prepared for the job than Marcus Freeman, than Mike Mickens. Whether we agree or disagree with that decision is irrelevant. I can just tell you with pretty good certainty that if Marcus Freeman would have offered the job to Mike Mickens, he would have gladly accepted that position. I'm pretty confident in saying that. I don't think Mike Mickens had any hesitancy about taking this position over. I think Marcus Freeman felt somebody else was better qualified for it. And I hope, and we all hope, that Coach Freeman is right. Yep. I don't know what kind of coordinator that Mike Mickens would have been. That's not the point. It's more just about you are taking a big risk. You better hope it pays off, and I hope it does. Because, as a Notre Dame fan, I want it to work, because I want Notre Dame to keep doing what they did this year and better. And as a business owner, I want it to work, because if it doesn't work, then I'm not making as much money. And our business is not making as much money, because when things aren't going well for Notre Dame, people stop paying for message board subscriptions and they stop watching shows. And I understand. I wouldn't watch shows every day for a team that sucks. I'd find something else to do. So I hope it works. And I know that Marcus Freeman made this move pretty quickly, which tells me he's got confidence that this is the right move. And I hope he's right. That's the one thing we should all be able to agree on, is I hope that he's right, that this is the right move for the program and it's the best move for the program.
Yep. Irish Gordian Nod, do you have any non-football related projects on deck for the offseason?
Well, obviously we're always looking to adapt and adjust what we do, but I guess that kind of counts as a football related thing as our content. But we're gonna try to get a walkway put into our backyard. Right now we have like some bricks that I don't love. We have a fire pit area, and I'm trying to get like a walkway, like concrete walkway put in there. And then we had a garden area blocked off last year that we never got to. I'm hoping that we'll be able to use that this summer. I'm not holding my breath, but it's always something that I'm working on. And I have a feeling we may need to get a new deck, our deck repaired, because the people that put our deck in a few years ago did a crappy job. And so it's going to need a lot of work, but just some stuff like that. But most of my time is focused on this. So, yeah.
I live in an apartment, so I mean, I don't really have projects to do around the apartment because it's not mine. But I mean, trying to lose weight. We're going to Hawaii for the honeymoon in June, and I'm in no shape to be walking around shirtless anywhere. So we got that.
What's funny is I never liked being without a shirt on, even when I was a college football player and in good shape. I've always felt really weird about being out in public without a shirt on. Like when I was a little kid at the swimming pool, it was a little different, but like, I don't know. It's weird. I was weird about that.
Yep.
We should talk, Trev. We should start because I've started sort of some things that I'm working on too, as far as getting healthier. We were kind of talking about it a little bit the other day with some of the stuff I'm doing, but we'll have to talk more about it.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah. HOAs are a scam, much like the IRS. Facts. Don't disagree at all. Don't disagree at all. All right, let's get to this one from The similar question was asked by him. Just want to kind of get to that. Here's a good one.
Chris W., do you think Bubacar is a first-round talent?
Yes. And I gave him a 5-star upside grade. And 5-star upside grade means I think you're a top 25 caliber player. So, yeah. Now, here's the concern about Bubacar. Injuries. He was banged up a lot as a senior in high school. He got hurt last year. He's got to prove he can stay healthy. But if he's healthy and getting coaching and he's putting in the work, yeah, I think he's got first-round ability. He's got special talent, in my opinion. Absolutely special talent. He was my number one upside guy in the 2023 class. I mean, yeah, Trevor, I don't know. You do you see it that way with Bubacar?
Yeah, man. I mean, the potential's absolutely there. There's just, again, some question marks, right? Can you stay healthy? Can you put together a full season of production? And once that starts to hit, then it's going to be a question of like, okay, like what do you do with some remaining years of eligibility, right? It's like, are you going to have like one really good producing year and then go? Because that could also affect first round grades. Who knows? But as a talent specifically, yeah. I mean, you started to see flashes of it last year, or well, in 2024. Super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. The final 4 teams in the playoff this season, what do you think their biggest concerns are heading into the season, and can they get back?
Tyler, I love that you asked so many questions about other teams, but I'm just not in a position to, as I said earlier in the week, I haven't been able to study every team and what they have coming back yet. I plan to get to that this weekend. But of what I know, here's some early questions that I have. For Notre Dame, obviously, you're going to have a new quarterback. You're going to have a new defensive coordinator. What do those things do for your team chemistry? What do they do for your continuity? You're going to have a different looking offensive line, and you lost some big time leaders. Can you replace those guys? Can you make the adjustments on the offense to become a more balanced offense now that you don't have a quarterback that can just you can just ride in a game? I think those are the big questions for Notre Dame. And for Ohio State, I think they have a lot of question marks. I was discussing this with a friend of mine last night. He's like, they could take a big step back. And I was like, if you mean big step back, meaning like they only make it to the quarterfinals, then sure. I was like, but dude, this is not the first time Ohio State's going to lose a bunch of dudes in the NFL and they still keep winning. They're still going to be a really good team next year. But obviously they have a new quarterback as well. They're going to have just like Notre Dame, they're going to have a very inexperienced quarterback next year that's talented. They're going to have to replace some key offensive linemen. Obviously, Josh Simmons is gone. He was replaced during the season by Donovan Jackson. He's in the NFL. I believe Seth McLaughlin's also done. Josh Pryor's gone to the NFL. So they're going to have some big shoes to fill in the offensive line. I'm not concerned about the running backs. I mean, Travion and Quinchon were very good. I like James Peoples. He's a good back. I think they'll be okay there because they're not a running team. They're going to have an elite receiving core next year. Yes, they lose a Mecca, but I think they'll be able to just slide Brandon Ennis in there and be just fine.
Yeah.
And they'll be good there. Their D-line, their defense is the bigger concern.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for me to really tell you this is what Ohio State's going to do because my question would be is who's their D coordinator? Mm-hmm. As far as I know, they haven't hired one yet. They're losing a lot off their D-line. I think their entire starting defensive line is gone, correct?
Their entire starting D-line is gone. Cody Simon's gone. Denzel Burke's gone. Lathan Ranson's gone.
That's a lot.
Jordan Hancock's gone.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I think their only returning starters are Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, and Davis Enigbenozin.
Now, 2 of those guys are really good starters, and Ohio State played a lot of guys.
Yep.
I mean, Arvo Reese played a lot of football this year. He's going to step in, I think, just fine for Cody Simon. He's a good football player. The Matthews kid, I think, will be able to step in for Denzel Burke and be fine. When he had to step in for Denzel against Texas when Denzel got hurt, he was pretty good. And they've recruited the position very well also. And that's my whole point about Ohio State is, yeah, they lose a lot, but they're not the no-brainer, best roster in college football next year. They're still going to have one of the 5 or 6 best rosters in college football next year. Yeah, they lose Jack Sawyer, and not a lot of teams can lose a guy like Jack Sawyer, JTT, and pop in Kenyatta Jackson and Eldrick Houston. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be just fine. They're going to go through some growing pains early in the season, just like a lot of teams are. And we were talking earlier about looking at their schedule, and I said yesterday, I think that, I think I'll predict them to beat Texas in the opener. I'm actually kind of changing my mind a little bit on that. I think Texas might win that game because Ohio State loses so much. But Ohio State's one of those teams where you look at Texas and at Washington and at Illinois and at Wisconsin, their first 7 games, they go into October 25th with a bye. If you haven't knocked them out of the playoff by then, you're not knocking them out of the playoff.
Yeah.
Because by the time they get into that November 1st game against Penn State and all those young guys got all that experience under their belt, I think they're going to be pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they can't lose a game, but like if they've only got 1 loss by then, they can. We've seen that they can lose 1 more and still be a playoff team.
Sure.
So they're going to reload, just like that's what great team. That's what Georgia loses all these guys in 2021, and they're back there the next year, and they lose all those guys after 2022, and they're what are they the next year? Their step back is 13-1, losing in the SEC title game. I mean, when you recruit the way Ohio State does, you're reloading.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, I think, is their thing is they got some linemen they got to replace on both sides of the ball. Obviously, losing Abdul Carter is a big loss. They have a lot coming back, though. Losing Tyler Warren's a big loss. They did get a couple transfers that hopefully can help them at receiver if you're looking at it from a Penn State standpoint. Losing Tyler Warren's a big loss, but that's a position where their roster's pretty loaded, that they won't have anyone as good as Tyler Warren, but they're still going to be good at that position. Drew Aller comes back. So I think Penn State might have the least amount of questions of the Final 4 teams, including Texas. Texas is going to have a new quarterback, but he's a kid that started games before. He started when Quinn got hurt this year. They lose a lot from their offensive line. They lost a lot of receivers, but then they're going to have Ryan Wingo back. They're going to have plenty of receivers back next year. They're going to lose a lot from their defense at certain spots, but they're going to have a lot of talented young players coming back. They're going to be like every other top team. There's some big shoes that they got to fill, but the roster's loaded and they'll be able to fill them.
Yeah.
So I think all 4 of those teams are going to be really, really good again next year. The team that I would say, as of right now, I'm most concerned about taking a step back would be Ohio State. But again, that's meaning they get to the first round and get knocked out. And that's just because there's so many unknowns. They don't have their staff put together yet. I mean, there's things like that, is Chip Kelly going to be back? There's rumblings of him going to the NFL. There's just more uncertainty around Ohio State. Once they get all that figured out, they're going to still be really good. I think these 4 teams are all going to go into next year as legitimate title contenders. Oh, yeah. I think some teams that are going to take big steps back are teams that lost in the quarters. Like I think Boise's going to take a big step back, obviously. Arizona State, we'll see. I think they just kind of had a little bit of a miracle season, to be honest with you. I'm curious what Georgia's going to look like next year. Very curious what Georgia's going to look like next year. Tennessee, what do they look like next year? I think those type of teams I'm more concerned about taking steps back than I am the 4 semifinal teams. I think they're all going to still really be really good again next season.
Jesse Ferguson, have you noticed Notre Dame landing more players from schools that don't project to Notre Dame? Simeon, Fort Wayne North, Fort Wayne Snyder, Warren Central, Ben Davis, Greenville, etc. How important is that in your opinion?
Well, it's not so much that I think it's important that you have to be able to recruit from those schools. I think it's important that you have more – you want to have more availability. You want to say, hey, can we expand our pool a little bit more? I think that what it says to me is that Marcus Freeman and this staff are more willing to battle for kids that maybe in the past this staff wasn't willing to battle for. And battle, it means 2 things. Number 1, battle means going against Ohio State and these schools for those kids. And then number 2, I think it also means a willingness to say, hey, we're gonna work with our admissions department. It's gonna be a lot of work. We're gonna have to tell these kids what they need to do. We're gonna have to stay on top of these kids and all that type of stuff. And if those kids are willing to do the work, then you do the work. I don't know that Brian Kelly's staff would have done the work needed to make sure that Chris Burgess got into Notre Dame. I think they just would have kind of let him go to Michigan or Ohio State. Chris Burgess is a great fit at Notre Dame, but he needed as a sophomore needed to kind of have that push and guidance to say, hey, you can be this. Let's give you something to shoot for. And then Chris had to go do the work. And guess what? He did the work. And I don't know that they would have maybe had the same push for him, which is a missed opportunity because he is a Notre Dame kid. but it wasn't an obvious Notre Dame kid, like kids from Cathedral and Bishop Dwenger and schools like that are more easy. Mount Carmel, you got to, it takes a little bit more work to realize that Bronte Johnson's a Notre Dame kid. Because early on, you're like, okay, this transcript's not a thing of beauty. Is this kid willing to do the work to get there? The past staff would have just moved on. This staff said, we love this kid. He's a great kid. He fits the culture here, and we think he wants to thrive, and he just needs the proper guidance. We're going to give that to him. Now, Bronte, it's up to you to go do the work. Because there was a time where I was like, there's no way they're getting Bronte Johnson into school. But how did he get into school? Did the admissions make an exception? Like, he's a 2-1, and he's barely in, but he's great. No, they said, Bronte, if you want to be here, this is exactly how it went down. If you want to be here, this is the admissions. You want to be here, you need to do A, B, C, D, E, and F. And it's up to you to do the work. And you know what Bronte said? Bet. And he went out and did it. And that says a lot about that young man. I don't know that the previous staff would have been willing to do that for a kid like that. So what you're realizing is guys like Chris Zorch and Tony Rice weren't natural fits for Notre Dame from an outside perspective. But when you get to know them, you realize these are Notre Dame kids. They just maybe don't have a test score, don't have the GPA, they didn't have the guidance or the opportunity, whatever the case may be. But we think they're Notre Dame kids, and we think they can thrive here. And guess what? They both came to Notre Dame. They were great players. They were great representatives of the university. They graduated from Notre Dame, and they're successful people. And this staff is more willing to say, hey, if we think you fit here, like there was a big-time defensive lineman last year that was in a similar boat to Chris Burgess and Bronte Johnson. I won't say his name. And they said, listen, this is what you need to do to get here. And he was like, I don't care about doing all that because these schools will take me for how I am now. And I don't really care to do that work. And so he went out and got C's and D's. And so Notre Dame said, peace out. Good luck to you. And so, like, there's kids like that. But you got to know now, like, okay, that guy doesn't want to do the work, so we're backing off. We're not going to waste our time. But when you find those kids like Bronte and you find those kids like Chris Burgess and there's some others, and you're saying, this is a Notre Dame kid. He just needs some work and needs some encouragement. But we think with the proper guidance, he could thrive. And they both did. And they both had good support systems at home to help them along the way, to help give them that encouragement and do that. And that's why they're both going to be at Notre Dame next year and why I think they both have chances to have heck of careers. And I just think this staff is more willing to fight for those kids and work with those kids and recruit against those kids who are also being recruited by top schools, where it's like not only do we have to recruit against Ohio State and Michigan for Burgess, but now we got to work with admissions to get them in school. It's just not worth it, man. Let's just go get some 3-star kid from from Bishop Cathedral or whatever, or Bishop Dwenger or whatever, who's easier to deal with. That's what they would do. This staff said, no, this is a kid that we think is a great fit here. But like a lot of top players, it's going to be work to get him here. We got to go battle Ohio State and Michigan for him and do these other things. And they made it. They did it, and they won the battle. And now Chris Burgess is going to be playing at Notre Dame. And you realize pretty quickly that's a Notre Dame kid. That is a Notre Dame kid through and through. And this staff was willing to fight for that. And the admissions department is from what I've been told, is their thing is, listen, if you bring us kids that are good kids and that you think can thrive here, we'll work with you as far as helping them understand what they need to do. So like people have said, Notre Dame's lowered their admission standards. And my answer is no, they haven't. I'm pretty confident that they haven't. From what it used to be. What they've done, however, is they're more willing to meet with kids when they're younger, look at transcripts when they're younger, and say, hey, listen, if you want to get accepted here, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. They'll meet with kids and they'll talk with kids and kind of get a read on kids. And if they're like, hey, this is a great kid, he needs to show us some things, they'll tell him exactly what he needs to do. And if he gets it done, then they'll bring him in. And if he doesn't, then they won't. It's not lowering the standard. It's saying, here's what you need to do to get up to the standard, but we're going to work with you on that. Where in the past, those kids wouldn't find that out to the end of their junior years. Now they're finding out as sophomores. It gives them a lot more time to do the work they need to do. And that's what it comes down to. And guys like Bronte and Chris Burgess, they're doing the work. And that's why I think they're going to be successful and why I'm rooting for those kids to be successful, because you know how hard they had to work to get here, when it would have been much easier for both of them to say, screw this, Michigan's not asking me to do this. Ohio State's not asking me to do this. Bama's not asking me to do this. I'm just going to take the easy road and go there. Those kids said, no, I want Notre Dame. I want that. I want to be there. I want that degree. I want this, and I'm willing to do the work to get there. And when you find kids like that from those schools, they tend to be real hungry. And you're getting a kid that's a grinder. And I think that's something that's important for Notre Dame to have those type of kids. But some of those kids fits in. I mean, yeah, I know Brandon Logan came from Snyder and it's a public school, but Brandon Logan got accepted to Vanderbilt. Brandon Logan is a Notre Dame kid. He doesn't need to work. He just is, you know, and you've got to be willing to find those kids. That's the other part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
MT41, favorite opponent press box this season?
Oh, boy. Let's see here. What A&M had a pretty cool press box. It shook the whole time. That's the only problem. Hated being in Purdue's press box. It's not a bad view, but there was somebody in the press box that had really bad BO. And that was very, very annoying. Didn't get a chance to see Georgia Tech's press box this year because they moved that game to Mercedes-Benz, and I didn't go to USC. So I would say that it would have to be A&M for this season. Be my favorite one. There's some others that I've been to in the past I really like. I like North Carolina and Virginia's press boxes because they're both open air. And so you're kind of you're out. Clemson's is like that too, but Clemson has us more in the corner. Georgia's got an awesome press box. We're like out towards midfield. It's an open air press box. You're a little lower. You got a great view of the field. I love their press box at Georgia. Wake Forest it's a little small, but it's a real nice press box. It's got a real good angle of the stadium. Usually really good food. BC had really good food when we went there in 2017. I think it's the last time I was at BC. They had really good food there. But yeah, those are some of my favorite press boxes. A lot of those ACC schools actually have really cool press boxes. And a lot of those Southern schools have open air press boxes. The only reason I don't like Clemson's is because it's in the corner. If it was more out towards the middle, I'd like their press box too. I don't know what it is, like the open air press box. You can like hear the stadium and you hear the crowd and all that. I think it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Wake Forest has a really nice little small stadium. Like it's tiny, but it's a really nice little stadium. I like it. Somebody said, "Are you sure the Purdue smell is BO and not just Purdue's?" Trust me, because it started before the game started. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. Yep, I have a pretty good idea who it was because then there's this one guy in front of me, and when he got up and left, it went away.
Oh,
yeah, yep. I know it's not very nice, but it's facts.
DJ Holman, a throwback to Donovan McNabb and his mother. What current Notre Dame player would you pick to star in a Campbell's Soup commercial with their mom?
Oh, Christian Gray and Chandra Gray. That's an easy one. Yeah, that'd be an easy one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Matthew Leahy, what is the difference between Angeli this offseason and Pine in the 22 offseason? In reference to clear the difference both IB and the team could see in touch, accuracy, and reads.
I mean, Angeli's just more talented than Drew was. I mean, that's really the big difference. He's a better athlete. He's bigger. He's got a better arm. I think Drew probably read defenses a little bit better than Steve, but not a ton. I mean, he's just a better talent. That's the biggest difference. He's the better talent. He was the guy that you look at and say, okay, we think we have better players, but he's good enough to say, hey, let's see if he can battle and let's give him a shot. Where with Drew, it was always like, yeah, there's a very clear difference in talent here. And if Tyler's healthy, Tyler's a significantly better player. And we're going to bring in Sam Hartman, or it wasn't Sam Hartman at the time, but a transfer quarterback that ended up being Sam. You're just like, yeah, you have to go to the portal and bring that guy in. I think with Steve, you see things in him that you like. Now, Drew was a great kid and leader, and players loved him and all that, but he was very limited talent-wise. Drew was a really good quarterback as a sophomore and junior. The problem is he just never got any bigger and never got any stronger. There was no projection beyond what he was younger in his career, and that was a big issue for him. Steve has gotten bigger and stronger and more athletic and those type of things, and so I just think he's just a different player. He's got a stronger arm, He's a better athlete. He can use his legs more effective. I don't know anything that Drew Pine does better than Steve Angeli.
Agreed. I like it. Short answer is just Angeli's the better overall quarterback.
Yeah. It's not a shot at Drew. I love Drew Pine. Love his family. It's just that's the evaluation. He's just bigger, taller, has a better arm, better athlete, similar processing ability. Outside of that, they're the same guy. Outside of that, you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah.
Both great team guys. That's the one thing, is like both respected by their teammates. Both very respected by their teammates.
Yeah.
That is definitely one thing they both have in common. Just Steve has better skill. And that's why Steve will have a legitimate shot to battle for the job. And Drew was always going to be a backup.
Yeah.
That you just knew we have to upgrade this position.
I'll give it to Drew Pine. He had an elite celebration after tossing a touchdown pass to Kevin Austin against Wisconsin.
Conor McGregor thing.
The Conor McGregor walk. Yeah. Hats off.
You know, something that Drew and Steve both have in common is they both think they're a lot better than they are. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, because if Drew Pine didn't have a healthy view of himself, he probably would have transferred somewhere much smaller. And Steve would have transferred by now. If Steve viewed himself the way I view Steve, he would have transferred this offseason.
Yeah.
And that's a compliment. That's not an insult. That's a compliment, because those kind of guys are guys that you kind of want to have next to you. Like, this guy's going to give me everything he's got, you know, and he thinks he's the man, and he's got that chip on his shoulder to kind of go prove it to everybody. Not the guy that thinks he's better and thinks everything should be handed to him, but a guy that thinks he's better and he wants to go show you that he's better. And that's what I love about Steve, is he doesn't think he is what I think he is.
Yeah.
But he knows that a lot of people like me think he is what he is, and he's got that chip on his shoulder. And I love that about the kid. Like, people think, oh, you're anti. I love Steve Angeli. I think he's an awesome kid. I wish he had a better arm. I wish he read defenses better. I wish a lot of things, because as far as like the cool, calm demeanor, the confidence, the leadership ability, the attitude, he's got all the things you want in a quarterback. Just doesn't have the talent. I wish he did. Because a lot of those other things I love about that kid.
Yeah. It's
not personal. It's just, that's my assessment of him as a football player. And same thing with Drew Pine. I think Drew Pine's an awesome young man. I love his family. His talent is what it is, you know, and, you know, it's unfortunate, but it just is what it is. Doesn't mean I think he's a terrible kid. I think he's an awesome kid.
DK, Brian, do you think Ash's time in the NFL will transfer back to college?
I hope so. I have to think that's going to factored into part of the fit that Marcus Freeman believes is there. Because, like, if you're going to tell me that he got the job based on what he did at Ohio State, I'm going to have a major, even a bigger problem than I already have with the hire. Because you can't run that defense anymore. And that defense doesn't fit what they do. Just like I would have said, if Al Golden is going to run at Notre Dame the defense he ran at Virginia back in 05 and 06, I'd be like, dude, this is a problem. You can't run that defense here. Like, you can't run a 3-4 old school mid-2000s defense in 2022. You can't do that anymore. You can't run what you ran at Temple. But we knew that Al Golden had been influenced by his time in the NFL, and we saw some of the things that the Bengals did, and you said, okay, I don't know what his defense is going to look like, but I know it's not going to be that. And I have to think that that's also true of Chris Ash, that his time in the NFL and the things he's done has sort of influenced him to a degree where his philosophy is more in line with what Marcus Freeman's philosophy is, and not the philosophy he was running back when he was at Wisconsin and Ohio State over a decade ago. That's what I have to think. So I think it'll be part of the conversation. I do. Thoughts on that, Trev?
I sure hope so. I mean, it's the same. I hope so. I wish I had a magic 8-ball and a crystal ball to kind of wave around and tell everybody what the answer is. But if I'm just being 100% transparent, I have the same questions that you all do about Chris Ash. I hope so, you know, but when you just look at his resume, I mean, he's barely been a coordinator in the last decade. When he was his last stop, it was not good. And since then, it's kind of gone backwards. He was a defensive backs coach for the Raiders, which he got fired from, and now he's a pro scout for the Jacksonville Jaguars and isn't even on the coaching staff. It's not a shot at him. That's just his resume if I were to pull him up on LinkedIn. So I hope so. But, I mean, as his time in the NFL, it wasn't like Al Golden's where he was the linebackers coach on a Super Bowl appearance Cincinnati Bengals team and called the third down defense. So I have no idea. I have no idea if I'm just being genuinely honest. But you can hope all of the reasons above, like we talked about, you hope Marcus Freeman had those conversations. You hope that that was a part of the evaluation. You hope that was a part of the interview process. You hope that Chris Ash had a change of heart with how he conducts himself around other people. It's a lot of question marks. And if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, we're all going to find out together. And I'm hoping that it was the right move. Because whatever is good for Notre Dame, I'm team Notre Dame. And I've been very vocal about that since I started with Irish Breakdown. So I'm hoping. Mark Avalone, you mentioned the defensive line has 22 on the roster right now. Did it surprise you no one hit the portal?
No. I mean, I think a lot of those guys are going to compete. And there's several kids that are close to getting their degrees, and they want to get their degrees. So, no, I think that I'm not as surprised that no D lineman jumped in the portal. There's other positions I'm more surprised, not D line. I think there's kids there that want to get their degrees. There's kids there that want to compete in the spring and see how things shake out. So that's how I feel about the D line. So no, I'm not surprised by that one, Mark. I'd say linebacker, I'm a little surprised. Pleasantly surprised that no running backs jumped in.
Yep.
So I'm pleasantly surprised that no more receivers jumped in. And I know that there were some of the Notre Dame's top players were getting big offers to leave, and they didn't. And that's a great sign Massive. As well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jonathan Hagerman, will the extra games in the playoff be a benefit or hindrance to the 2025 season?
I think it'll be a benefit. And I can understand where we'd think hindrance because, you know, it went deeper and you missed some winter workout time and things like that. They'll be able to make that back up because they were still conditioning. They were still working out. The big thing is, Jonathan, is that's a whole extra month's worth of practice. And you look at like Jadon Blair, Madden Faramo, Blake Hebert, Ethan Long. They were all part of the team for the last 3 weeks of the season. They were running scout team. They were getting reps. They were going through drills. They were in game plan meetings. They were doing all that kind of stuff. That's going to benefit those guys. And two of those guys you kind of think are going to have a chance to maybe play next year. You think about Charles Jagasol and the reps he got in practice and 2 games worth of reps that he would not have got in the old system, you know, where, you know, he wasn't ready for the Georgia game and the Indiana game. Well, that would have been the bowl games and the playoff game. So maybe he's in there for the last game as a potential reserve, but he wouldn't have got the work that he got. So, and all that extra practice time he got. And there are a lot of those young guys, all that extra practice time they got, you know, and like, I think those things are going to benefit them a ton. Plus, that experience of being in the playoff, competing at that level, realizing like, hey, we can do this. We can be this football team. And when you watch the film against Ohio State, you realize you missed a lot of opportunities to make more plays. And who knows how the game would have gone if you'd have made some of the more of those plays. Maybe you win, maybe you lose. But you realize, hey, we can compete with all these teams. And I think that is as long as they take the right lessons from that is beneficial. So, yeah, it throws off your winter conditioning a little bit. You're curious how the staff is going to handle giving these kids the proper rest to recover from the season and then getting back on track. But, you know, so there's some potential downsides in that regard. But overall, you know, there's some guys that got hurt later in the season that, you know, Anthony Knapp in an old system doesn't get hurt. So he goes into the offseason 100% healthy, building on the freshman All-American season he had. Now he's coming back from knee injury. You know what I mean? And so it's like there's a drawback. So for Anthony Knapp, it's not better. But for other guys, for the majority of the team, I do think it's better. And getting that extra work and all things come with it. So I think on the whole, it's definitely a positive and a benefit to 2015. or 2025. Because think about how much more practice time the young guys at Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas got compared to everybody else.
Well, now that, I mean, if this team lives up to expectations and what we believe that they can and reach their full potential, there's going to be no situation in 2025 that this coaching staff and the majority of this team is unfamiliar with. None of it's going to be uncharted territory, even if they make it back to the national championship. Like everything, like the travel, the random days in between practices, it's not going to be another season of, we're going to have to figure out how to construct our schedule, because you got to think the time in between Notre Dame and Indiana this year was a lot wider than Indiana to Penn State or to Georgia. And then they had, even that came with a little bit of a hiccup because of that unfortunate tragedy that happened down in New Orleans. Then you had a week to prepare for Penn State, and then you had 10 days to prepare for Ohio State. And so there's going to be nothing that this coaching staff encounters this upcoming season, especially in the postseason. Then it's like, well, we're going to try this and see how it works. Right? I'm not saying they're going to rinse and repeat the exact same thing that they did in 2024, because if you're a good coaching staff, you're always looking to improve what you're doing, but none of it's going to be new. And they are one of 4 programs I can say they played 16 games in 2024. So
that was so fun.
Oh,
that was so fun. What a fun year this was. It really was. It really was. Like, I so get the earlier question about the guy talking about he still watches the video of the Penn State. And I get it, man. This was such a fun year and such a memorable year. You don't want to let it go. That's what makes it hard with what we're doing, because like we got to start talking about 2025. But I'm like, but there's so much I want to say about this past season. Yeah, it was a fun year.
I am Tenzin. Some people have texture issues with food. My family is a portion of that crowd. I'm a taste guy. Which is more important to you, texture of the food or the taste?
It's both, right? I mean, I am a texture guy in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of foods I won't try because of it. But like, I like calamari, even though I tend not to like that type of texture of food. I just got to not look at it. Like, I got calamari when I was down. We went to this restaurant. I can't remember what it was called in Miami. When we were sitting there, Angie and I were there working and watching the Ohio State game, and I got calamari. And when I eat calamari, Trevor, I can't look at it, because I got to eat it and just kind of watch TV and not look at it. And then, you kind of deal with the texture, because I really like the flavor. But I'm both. I'm a texture guy. But listen, something's got to taste good for me to have it, obviously. But there's things I probably wouldn't try just because of the texture, I won't, you'll never see me try like sushi. Just couldn't do it. Can't do it. There's certain fish I don't like because of the texture. I just can't get past the texture. It's just too squishy for me. So yeah, I'm a little bit of both, a little bit of food, but taste ultimately is king. It's got to taste good.
Yeah, I'm strictly a taste guy. I think that there's some like texture crossovers to where it's like sometimes you find yourself like, well, how do you like this but not like this if you don't like this kind of texture? But it's all preference. I mean, my wife is crazy with texture. Doesn't like chocolate mousse, doesn't like cheesecake, doesn't like any of that stuff because she says the texture is weird. And I will always, even if I think something has like a weird texture, because I still acknowledge it. If that makes sense. Like if something has a weird texture, I'm like, oh, that was odd. But like if it tastes good, that trumps it for me. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think some of that stuff is interesting. But she eats yogurt every morning for breakfast, but doesn't like pudding and cheesecake. And it's weird.
That is so weird. Yeah.
Oh no. We've
cheesecake?
Oh yeah.
That's
cheesecake.
I've never heard that one before.
Cheesecake, chocolate mousse, pie. She doesn't mess with any of it, but we'll have yogurt every morning for breakfast.
That is super weird.
So weird. We're working through it.
Yeah.
It's tough. We might have to see somebody.
Yeah. Good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah.
Luke Breeding asks, any word on how Rudolph's interview went? Thanks for all your hard work, guys. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything about it went well, didn't go well. Haven't heard anything about him being the leader or not the leader. I haven't had a chance to look into that. I'll probably, I don't, from what I was told last night by somebody who has looked into it, it doesn't sound like he's the top guy, but I have no idea.
Juwan Blair, of the 2025 transfers in and the class as a whole, who do you think will make the biggest impact this year?
Malachi Fields at receiver, I think will make a big impact. I don't see any other freshmen on offense making a big impact this season, barring injury. Maybe Will Black. I'd feel a lot better about saying Will Black if he was an early enrollee, but he's not. James Flanagan, maybe, since there's some lack of others, but he's not I don't think he's an early enrollee either. I'd have to actually go back and look at that. I don't remember for sure if he is. I for some reason I'm feeling like he isn't, but I'd have to go back and look at that one. But defensively, obviously Jared Dawson is a guy that I expect to be an impact player. Devontae Smith, I think, will make a big impact this season. Jalen Stroman, I'm a little bit more not certain of, just because he's coming back from the injury, and you never know how guys are going to be coming back from injuries. But if he gets back to form, I think he'll have a big impact as well. So those are the guys primarily that I look at and think they could have big impact. I think one of the freshman DBs will make a big impact this season, whether it's Jadon Blair, whether it's Dallas Golden, whether it's Mark Zachary, Cree Thomas. I could see Brandon Logan maybe as a nickel. I think one of those five of that group. Yeah, five of that group. I'm not leaving out Ethan Long. I'm not forgetting about Ethan Long. He's more of he's going to need time to develop kind of guy. But I think one of those other five at least one of those guys will make an impact. Meaning, like, they may not start, but they're going to be in the two deep. They're going to be key players, that kind of thing. Like, I could see Jadon Blair at some point in time replacing Rod Hurd as that number 3 rotation safety. I could see Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary becoming like that next man in at corner, or part of the corner rotation like Christian Gray was in 2023, where he wasn't a starter, but they would work him into games and things like that, and he'd get some playing time. I could see that as well. None of the freshman D linemen, maybe Chris Burgess, but I don't see the freshman D linemen making that kind of impact as rookies. So that would be my stance. Anybody else that you think of, Trev, that you like Noah Burnett, anybody like that, they can make an impact as transfers?
Immediately, I really like Nolan James. I just think that there's a lot in front of him. You know what I mean? It's because then you get into the question of who's he going to take away snaps from. Then you kind of start talking about some of the wide receivers. I mean, I don't think any of the freshmen are going to. I think all the freshmen coming in will most likely end up redshirting, because that's what was constant with this year's receiver class, if I'm being completely honest. James Flanagan, barring injury, you never know. Cooper Flanagan and Eli Raridan are two guys that have struggled to stay healthy during their time at Notre Dame. Will Black, I kind of look at it the same way that I look at the running back room. It's like there's a lot in front of that kid for him to make an impact. Not saying that I don't believe that he could, but it's just there's going to be who does he take practice reps away from to make an impact in 2025 in the regular season? Defensively, of the freshmen, Jadon Blair working his way into the rotation, absolutely. One of Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary. And then for the transfers, I think Jared Dawson's going to be huge on defense. I think Devontae Smith is going to be huge for them on defense. And then transfers on offense, Malachi Fields is going to be a dude. I'm very excited about that pickup. And then Will Pauling's a little bit of a question mark for me, but you never know. Maybe he raises his stock within Notre Dame in the spring when Faison's out and he's playing lacrosse, and you never know. But a lot of potential in the 2025 transfers and incoming freshmen, that's for sure. AFMOS ND. It took Notre Dame a year of scuffling before being able to operate Golden's defense effectively. Do we expect a similar year 2 improvement on offense, even in line play?
I would actually encourage you to go back and listen to the show we did on Thursday, because we actually addressed this topic. I actually went through and showed the statistical jump that Notre Dame made defensively from year 1 to year 2. And maintained it in year 3. So it wasn't like you had that everything went right. You had a lot of veteran play, because they did have a lot of veteran players in 2023. I mean, you had a fifth year starters at all 3 linebacker spots. You had a 5th year starting nose tackle, a senior defensive tackle, a 6th-year senior at one end spot, a senior at the other end spot. Your nickel was a 5th year senior. You had a 5th year senior starting at cornerback. You had a 6th year senior starting at one safety spot. You had another senior in Xavier Watts starting at the other safety spot. And then your only young guy was really Benjamin Morrison. That was an extremely veteran football team. So you could say, well, okay, yeah, you had a bunch of older players, so of course you made that jump in year 2. Well, then they lost all those older guys, come out in 2024, and they're just as good, and in some areas better, with a true sophomore starting at one safety spot, a true sophomore starting at the other safety spot, a true freshman starting over half the year at one cornerback spot. You had a true sophomore starting a middle linebacker. Outside of Jack Kaiser's 6-year senior, the rest of your linebacker room was a redshirt sophomore who hadn't played a whole lot, a redshirt freshman who hadn't played any meaningful downs, a true sophomore in Drake Bowen, and a true freshman at linebacker. You were very experienced on the D-line, but then you lost Jordan Patelho. He gets replaced by a redshirt sophomore, 2 redshirt sophomores. You have a true freshman playing a lot at defensive end. You needed to rely on another redshirt sophomore to play a lot at defensive tackle in Donovan Hines. So very different situation in year 3 compared to year 2, but the production and the results were every bit as good because the foundation had been laid. And so I do look at that, and the thing that Trev and I pointed out, and this is why I would encourage you to go back and watch it, is I actually think statistically the 2024 offense was definitely significantly better than the 2022 defense from a production standpoint, ranking standpoint, impact on winning game standpoint, consistency once they got rolling. And September wasn't consistent, but once they got rolling in October, that offense was pretty good for the rest of the year. Even in the postseason, they did what they needed to do against pretty darn good defenses. Say, wow, Notre Dame didn't score a lot of points in the postseason. I'm like, yeah, it's very true. They didn't score a whole lot of points. They scored 23 points against a team that only gave up 12. They scored 27 points against a team that only gave up 14 coming into that game. They scored 27 points against a team that only gave up 16. And they scored 23 points against a team that was only giving up 20 coming into that game. Right? You played pretty darn good defenses. The worst defense, we said this, the worst defense they played in the playoffs was Georgia. That was literally the worst defense they played in the playoff statistically. And, so it's like, yeah, they did pretty good. Will they be able to build on that foundation? We're going to find out. But we did this. I like where your head's at, because we literally had this same discussion and during yesterday's show. A whole segment was about this. So I'd encourage you to listen to yesterday's show. I think you'll like what we talked about, because it sounds like your head's kind of going to the same place we are, which is why Trevor and I are really excited about what we think this offense is going to look like in the next couple of years, because we prescribe to this right here. So especially when you consider how young this offense was in a lot of places.
Oh yeah. Yep. No, they're in a really great spot for 2025. All for the points that Brian said. We do a really good breakdown of it in a previous show. So.
If we do say so ourselves. Which we do say so ourselves.
We do. We sure do. Brett Lott, following spring football, do you think there will be enough writing on the wall that a quarterback will jump into the portal, or will it extend into fall camp for all 3?
I think it'll extend into fall camp. I don't think that I don't know that any of those guys, the only guy that could potentially seize hold of it right now by the end of spring would be Steve. I don't see a scenario in which CJ or Kenny has it locked down. Wow, they're the guy. Wow, those. I mean, they're so far ahead of anybody else. The reason I only say Steve is not talent wise, but looking at it from the standpoint of experience, right? Leadership. He'd be in position to do so. I don't think he's going to do so because of what I just said, the talent. If Steve had CJ or Kenny's talent, it's a no-brainer who I think is going to win the starting quarterback job, because it's a similar talent with an extra year of experience. So that's kind of how I'd go with that one. But, I don't think we'll know who the starter is. I think we'll have a clear – I think this is what the hierarchy is going into fall camp. Maybe that leads to someone making a decision, but I think it'll be a battle that they're going to go into fall camp, and with genuinely still needing to see things. Because, let's say CJ is the best quarterback in the spring. He's still a redshirt freshman that didn't play a whole lot, and I need to see how, if he does go into the summer as the number one guy, how does he handle that? How does he handle being the front runner? Does he get more focused? Does he get less focused? Does the pressure start to get to him? Does how he is as a teammate change? I don't think that's going to be true of CJ from what I know of him, but that's a question I always ask when looking at a young player that gets a lot of early success. You need to see how does he handle success in that type of situation. And so I just don't see any scenario in which they definitely say, hey, CJ, you're the guy, no doubt about it. Kenny, you're the guy, no doubt about it. I will say this, if that happens, I'm already excited about the quarterback position for next year. If Kenny or CJ is so good this spring that they're just like, yeah, that's the guy, then I'm going to be really excited about what this season looks like. Really excited.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. What do you think that I mean, what do you think the odds are that we know, like, not that we know, like, we all know, we were there, we were at the practices, we know who the best guy was, but where it's like the coaches are like decision-making mode, we know who it's going to be. What do you think the odds are that happens in the spring?
Look, I said this when the quarterback competition finally first came into light here after the season was over. I think what's most likely going to happen is two, and I'm not going to throw out names because I don't know who it's going to be. I think two will separate themselves. And I think that it is – I think it's unrealistic that all three go into fall camp, and I'll leave it at that because I find it a hard time to believe that – now, Notre Dame would be in a great spot if this happens, but if all three guys are just balling out at an insane level and they're just like, oh, man, we just have no idea who it is. We're just going to have to wait and see. I think it's more realistic that two of them are most likely going to start their play, their performance within the offense. I think it's going to start becoming higher than the third, and I don't know who that's going to be. But I think that it's going to be tough to have all three return in the fall for it to be like, all right, we got 6 weeks to battle it out and find out who's going to be the starter for August 31st. I'll leave it at that. That's kind of how I think it'll happen.
All right. Let's get to this next one, Trev. We have a super chat from ICURN with Irish Luck. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the super chat. I know you said Malachi Fields reminds you of Boykin, but I never felt he played as athletically as he tested. How do you think Fields comps to McMillan? I see a lot of similarities in their game.
Some. I mean, there's some things I watch with McMillan where I say, okay, that Fields reminds me of that. I think Fields is a better route runner than McMillan is. I think he has a little bit more dog in him than McMillan. I think McMillan's incredibly talented, but he's really erratic. I think some weeks he looks like just a dominant wide receiver, and then other weeks you're just like, where are you at, dude? Like, what do you got going on here? What's going on right now? I mean, if you think about it, how does a guy that has 304 yards in one game and 202 yards in another game only end up with 1,300 yards in the season? I mean, because there's a lot of 5 for 38s and 2 for 11s and 6 for 50s mixed in there. And I just look at him and I'm like, he's a guy that's got a lot of talent, but never really did it consistently. So I'd say Malachi, I think, plays a little bit more consistent effort. I think you could say he plays faster than Miles did at times. But look, I'm telling you right now, there's times when Miles Boykin in 2018 was a dog. I mean, he was just a flat-out unguardable dude. And I think Miles had a little bit of that inconsistency issues as well. I think Miles was pretty decent after the catch. I think Malachi's better than both of them. I don't think McMillan's quite as good with the ball in his hands as what I think Malachi is. So, I mean, I wouldn't sit there and be like, dude, you're crazy. You're crazy for thinking that that's a comp. I'm fine with that. I just don't. I think Miles is more. I think Miles is place. I think Miles and Malachi both play strong. In that regard, I think the ball skills for Malachi are really good, and the production numbers are similar too. I don't see Malachi having the kind of overall production that McMillan had. I mean, I'm talking about how he should have had more yards. He still finished with 1,300 yards. My thing is he had 500 of them in 2 games. You know what I mean? But he was still incredibly productive at times. So I just I think Miles is probably the better comparison, although I would agree with you that Miles did not play like he tested, but I don't think Malachi's a 4.42 either. I think he's probably closer to 4.5, when I look at his testing. And I think that's kind of how Miles played. I think the difference between Miles and Malachi is I just don't know how much Miles Boykin loved football. And I've said that before. And that's the reason he didn't break out till his senior year. I think he liked playing football, but I don't know how much he actually loved playing football. And I don't mean that as an insult, because there's nothing wrong with you not loving to play football. Did he really have a burning desire to perfect his craft? I don't know that he did. Malachi plays with a little bit more of that, in my opinion. So, there's no perfect comparison. I think there's a little bit of both of those guys in him. But I still think Miles is still the better player. And then we got one from, I think this is the last one, from Jason Rose.
Hey guys, if James Blanchard is a hire for GM, how big will his Texas roots be in recruiting?
I mean, I think they're going to be huge. I think it's a big reason why you go after a guy like him, on top of all the good things I've heard about his management style and his attention to detail and being able to kind of run a whole operation, not just be a recruiter, but like run an operation. He wasn't a guy like Chad was a great recruiter that they kind of put into the GM role because that's how they needed to keep him. James is, from what I can tell, his training is more in running the operation, and he happens to also be a dynamic recruiter. It's a little bit different. So I think that translates really well, but it's very clear that Marcus Freeman wants Texas to become a big part of their recruiting operation. Very clear. And you're hiring a guy that literally born in Texas, raised in Texas, went to Lamar for college. He coached with the Baylor. I mean, he's not coached, but, worked with Baylor. He was at Texas Tech. I think looking at his resume, I think the only thing that I noticed from his resume where he wasn't in Texas was like a year he spent with the Carolina Panthers. From what I can tell, that's the only time he hasn't been in Texas. And you look at the success he had recruiting at Texas Tech. You do not have that kind of success in Texas Tech just because you spent NIL money. Did having NIL money help? Sure. But A&M's got NIL money. Baylor's got NIL money. Like any big schools in Texas got oil people as part of their alumni booth. You got those guys because his relationships with players and coaches and parents worked, and they were able to sell that. That now you, and I said this, remember what I said last week? I said, you want to talk about what can make you a better recruiter? Guy can walk into a high school. He's got an FIU logo on his polo, and he may be loved and liked and appreciated, but he's not walking out of there with the dudes. He's finding the sleepers. That next year, that guy's got a U on his polo, or an FSU on his polo, or a Gator head on his polo, or the cursive A that stands for Alabama on his polo. Now all of a sudden, same guy, same recruiting chops, he's walking out that door with dudes. You know what I mean? Like Chad Bowden couldn't have landed 95% of the guys, if not more, that he landed Notre Dame. He's not landing if he's still at Cincinnati. Same with Marcus Freeman. I don't care how good of a recruiter you are, you're still at Cincinnati. You're still at, Texas Tech. But you get that brand power behind you, and all of a sudden, this guy last year loved you, but coach, man, I'm not turning down Texas to go to Texas Tech. I love you, but I'm not doing it. I'll turn Texas down to go to Notre Dame now. You know what I mean? Like, that's where the guy's got the chops. He's got the chops. This is why I say recruiting, you give me a guy that's a great recruiter at the FCS level, and you give him a job at a big-time school like Notre Dame, from a recruiting standpoint, now the coaching part, we'll find that out, but from a recruiting standpoint, if you got the chops, you got the chops, man. It's because you got that brand power behind you. He's never recruited athletes like this. Yeah, because he never could recruit athletes like that. But recruiting elite athletes isn't about knowing how to relate to it's the same. It's about communication and trust and building relationships and selling a vision for how you view them. It's just the brand of player and family I'm doing this with is a little bit different than the one I did when I was, at Baylor or Texas Tech. And so, like, that's the way I look at it is he has those relationships are established. But now when those high school coaches are calling him, they're not calling, hey, man, I got this sleeper kid. Like, he went to Texas and performed. I think this kid can play for you guys, coach. Now he's calling him like, hey, man, I got this stud. I got this 5-star kid that, for some reason loves going to class and do, you know what I mean? I think he can come up Notre Dame. It's a whole different animal now. And so but the relationships are already established. Now he's got that Notre Dame brand power coming from behind him. Man, now he's got that ND on his chest or the golden helmet on his chest, depending on which polo they wear. They wear both. They do ND. They'll do stuff, say Irish. They'll do stuff that have golden helmet. You got that brand power coming up behind you. That's how you become a star in recruiting to the level to where you're not known for your work ethic and your organization and your people skills, but you're now evaluated on your results. And Notre Dame absolutely wants Texas to become a big part of what they're doing. But a guy like him, you're not bringing him in just because you can recruit in Texas. It's you think his skill set would project to be able to recruit in Georgia, in Florida, in Ohio, in Jersey, in California, and nationally, which is who you are at Notre Dame. And those things translate. Being trustworthy, being organized, being smart, being an evaluator, being honest, being someone who people can relate to. That is universal. People in Ohio can relate to someone like that just as someone. Now, where we can't relate is you start talking about certain food things you like down in Texas. I'm like, y'all go ahead and have that, buddy. I'm cool. I'm not going to be eating them frog legs. Like, like talking to my uncle and mom, they're like, oh, we used to have frog legs. You ever had frog legs? Heck no, I've never had frog legs. I'm civilized. You know what I mean? What's wrong with you? But, different part of the country, it's like, that's different than I still want to be treated with respect. I still want you to be honest with me. That goes everywhere. Yeah. I still want you to lay out a vision for how you're going to raise my son, right? That's universal. He may be able to connect with certain people from certain parts of the country because he's got that. You ever listen to him talk, Trev? He's country now. I mean, he's going to go down south, and you're like, you're at Notre Dame, man. I expect Notre Dame people talk a little bit different. He says man every other word, like some cats in the South do. So he'll be able to relate to people in the South a little bit more just as far as initial communication, but that only goes so far. That might get you in the door and a meet and greet, but what gets you the kid is, man, this guy's trustworthy. Yeah. This guy's backs up what he says. He treats me with respect. He's honest. He's a hard worker. They did a great job of selling the vision for me. Like, man, I run through a wall for this guy. And now he's got that ND brand behind him. He's got Marcus Freeman coming into school with him. No offense to Joey McGuire, but Joey McGuire walks into a room and Marcus Freeman walks into a room. The reaction is going to be very different unless we're walking into Joey McGuire's alma mater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where you look at it is I think it'll be huge when it comes to being able to recruit the state of Texas. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Notre Dame spent their first 2-3 days on the road this week down in Texas. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm just saying. I don't think it's a coincidence.
No, I agree with everything you said, man. The only thing I have to add is frog legs are pretty good. So
I can't do it. I can't do it, man. I can't do it.
But
my mom she hasn't had them in a while, but she would eat them as a kid. My Uncle Marty eats them all the time. Like, no, man. I'm too city. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, but I had my dad's born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia. He's city. And I'm more like him in that regard. Like, man, my mom will eat like liver and no, not me.
My thing with food, my mantra is I will always try anything once. Like no matter what it is, just to say that I've tried it.
I'm way too picky for that, man. Because I'm like, look, I don't want to. Because sometimes you're like, man, I can't get that taste out of my head. No, I'm more of like, I know what I like, and I'm going to stick to what I like. What's worked for me is my wife over the years has kind of learned what I do and don't like, and she's kind of learned to really understand. So if she recommends me to try something that I've never had before, I'll try it. Sure. Because I know she's thought about, like, I know what Brian likes, what he doesn't like. I don't think he'd like that. And so, so she won't recommend things. We're like, my mom my mom will try to get me to try anything. And she's like, no, I think you'll like it. She knows I'm not going to like that mess. you know, and my mom's like, she'll sneak stuff into food. Like, did you like this? I'm like, it tastes a little bit different. Oh, you couldn't tell that. I'm like, yeah, I could, Mom. My wife is more open about it. Like, hey, I don't think you're going to like this, but you can try it if you want. And she's like, no, I actually think you'll like this. And then also there's some things I've come to like that I didn't like texture of, but I made it so much for her, like caramelized onions. I hated onions growing up as a kid. And I like, if I had onions in my chili and spaghetti, but I'd chop them up so fine that you couldn't see them. I'd literally chop up peppers and onions. Like I still do this when I make chili. I'll chop in little slices and I'll put them in the blender and put the sauce in there with the tomato chunks and blend it, because I don't like chunks of vegetables in my sauce. But Angela really likes caramelized onions. And so I learned how to make caramelized onions, and I'd make them for her. And I'm like, man, these smell freaking phenomenal. And when I first had them, I didn't love the texture, but I eventually got past it. She's like, just try it. I think you'll like it. And I was like, all right, whatever. I don't like onions, but whatever. You say I'll like it. I'm like, this is legit. Now, whenever I make smash burgers, I make caramelized onions.
Oh yeah.
And I've even made caramelized onions a couple times, put on top of a steak, just something different. But you know, it's because she knows my taste better. And I know if she tells me to try something, I'll try it. I'll at least be open-minded enough to try it. Doesn't mean I like everything, but I'll try it. Sure. Apparently, I'm the only person that has not tried frog legs in this chat. So, yeah, I just can't get past the fact that it's a freaking frog. That's the thing for me. So, but yeah, a lot of people apparently have said it tastes just like chicken.
It does.
I'll trust y'all. I'm not going to find out. I'm going to believe you. I'm not going to find out. I'm just telling you, I'm not going to find out, but I believe you. I believe you. Some of y'all would hang out with my family. Some of the stuff y'all eat. Nope. No, sir. No, sir. Hey, look, but you need this to survive. You know what? I'm not afraid to go meet Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all good. It's all good. Heaven sounds like a good idea compared to having to eat that stuff. So it's all good, man. Never had turtle before either. Somebody just said turtle. I never had that either. Funny story I have about turtle before we get out of here, Trev. I went fishing with my Uncle Marty one time. He was a Marine. I just, once a Marine, always Marine. That's my guy. Love that guy, but he's a different cat now. And we were going to go fishing at one of the reservoirs in Lima. And we were out by, I can't remember what creek it was, but we were walking down a creek and we were looking for chubs, right? So we catch chubs. Cause I can't remember. I think we were going catfish. And I think maybe I forget what it was, but you need like bigger bait. You can't just do worms. You need bigger bait. So we were looking for chubs, and he's shining his flashlight into the creek looking for, schools of chubs. And he sees a snapping turtle. So what does this guy do? He runs into the freaking creek, jumps in, grabs the turtle out, cuts the turtle's freaking head off, and then takes it home. And I'm like, this guy's insane. My freaking uncle's Rambo. What is wrong with it? But like, that dude was crazy, man. But that's the difference of how you grew up. My dad's looking at me like, this guy's nuts. My dad's a city guy. He never thought of jumping into a creek to go after a freaking turtle. Are you kidding me? He's like, oh, turtle's really good. I'm like, you're insane. You're a crazy person. But yeah, just a little bit of a different deal, man. Yeah. Just a different deal. But I know what I like and I make what I like. So
fair enough.
Yeah. Not experimental. Not experimental.
Hey, that's all right. You like what you like.
Yeah.
That's all good, man. That's all good. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us today here on the Friday Free for All Mailbag. Thank you guys for being a part of it. Really great submissions today, guys. We had some really good conversations today.
Right? Talking about crab legs and snapping turtles' heads getting cut off. Man, hey, you now know you're in the off season. When food conversations are coming up during a mailbag, we're in an off season when that's going on, man.
That's all right, man. It keeps us on our toes. We all get to know each other a little bit better every day. But as always, guys, listen, be sure to hit that like button on your way out, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Whatever podcast platform you listen to this on, whether it's Spotify podcast or Apple podcast, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. And I can't speak for the turtle conversation or the frog leg conversation, but we do have a lot of great conversations going on over the premium message
I don't think
boards.
We're going to be talking about that on the message board.
No, I don't think so either. But there's a couple people in the chat that I think just out of spite might go put up a thread about frog legs and crab legs. So who knows?
Yep.
But Really awesome conversations going on over
Hey,
at Boards.
and Brian Felton, bro, you're from Louisiana. Of course you like different foods than I like, man. I told you, man, I'm from Norfolk. My dad's from Norfolk, Virginia. I grew up in Lima, Ohio, man. If I'd have grown up in Louisiana like my guy Brian Felton in the chat, Brian and I actually went to high school together. He at Kempsville High School together, and he was from Louisiana. So of course you don't have a problem with crab with frogs. You're from Louisiana. You're Cajun, man. I'm not. Think about where you met me, Virginia Beach. Come on now.
Hey man, I will say, listen, one thing that I will say real quick before we get out of here about Louisiana food down south. I've started to come on to Creole food and Cajun food now. It's good, man. It's good. Some chili cheese etouffee. That stuff is fire.
We had a lady I used to work with at BGI. She would have like this preseason party every year, and she would make gumbo. And I tried it. I mean, it was so good, but my body was like, don't ever put that in us again. Let's just say I'm glad I didn't have it the night before the game, because I might have not been good at the game. Yeah. Oh, so like there's things like that. Like my dad and my sister, when we were kids, we'd get wings from Daryl and Daryl's, and they'd get atomics. I mean, there's literally nothing above atomics. And they'd get like a mild sweat. I'm having mediums, like milds, like I need milk, I need pop. Yeah, I need it. Like, it's not that I don't like the flavors, it's my body's like, no, like my eyes are saying yes, but my body's saying no. It's like the opposite of the R. Kelly song. You know what I mean? My mind's telling me no, my body, no, my mind's telling me yes, and my body's like, no, we do not like that. I wish, like Mexican food, there's a lot of Mexican food that I think tastes good. I just can't have it very often because my body's like, nope, not digging it. See, Brian said, hey, Trevor's coming around. Follow his lead, brother. Again, with the case, I don't mind it. It tastes good. It messes my body up, dude. Can't do it. Can't do it, man. Can't do it.
Well, that
was a fun way to end the show.
That was good.
I appreciate y'all very much. That was fun. Then so-and-so is transferring out. Driscoll started the rumor. So-and-so's leaving Notre Dame.
Put it on the board.
I'll get in trouble for that one too.
All right, guys. Well, that'll do it. For Brian, I'm Trevor. We'll see you guys back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.